noise, the endless rush, and stepping into a time when survival was a daily battle, and small joys were nothing short of miracles. This is not the fantasy of knights in shining armor or endless feasts in candlelit halls. This is medieval life as it truly was, raw, unforgiving, beautiful, and brutally short. Over the next few hours, we'll walk the muddy roads, sit by the smoky hearths, and listen to the distant toll of church bells as darkness falls. We'll see how people lived, how they suffered, how they found meaning in fleeting moments of light. So settle in. Let the past unfold around you. Let the stories carry you through the cold stone walls, the endless fields, the silent nights. Welcome to the real medieval world. Welcome to Lore FM. The moment you open your eyes, it's not your alarm clock that greets you. It's cold. Not modern cold. We're talking damp, bone-deep chill, the kind that makes your breath fog in the air. The thatched roof above you creaks faintly as the morning wind pushes against it. You're wrapped in a rough wool blanket that smells faintly of mildew and smoke. Beneath you, straw. Old, half-rotted straw that crunches when you shift your weight, with the occasional flea bite reminding you it's alive with guests. There's no mattress. No memory foam. You're sleeping on the floor, sharing this tight wooden shack with your entire family. And yes, that includes your parents, your siblings, maybe even a pig or two depending on the season. Space is a luxury, and privacy is a myth. You wake up next to bodies curled in every direction. If you're lucky, no one rolled over and kicked you in the face during the night. The room is pitch dark except for the faint, gray light peeking through the gaps in the wooden planks. There's no window, just slits in the wall. No glass. Maybe a bit of oilcloth stretched over an opening if you're rich, which, judging by the smell in here, you are not. Before you even move, the smell hits you, a pungent, layered mix of unwashed humans, damp wool, stale food, and a hint of manure. It's not an attack on the senses, it's an ambush. You don't notice it every day, but if you had modern sensibilities, you gag. But here in the 1300s, it's background noise to the medieval brain. Your joints ache, even though you're only in your 20s. That's what hard labor and malnutrition will do to you. Your back complains as you sit up. The blanket slips off your shoulders, and now the cold sinks its teeth in. Your breath escapes in little white clouds. Fire. Ha. You have a small hearth, but it went out hours ago. Reigniting it takes time and wood, neither of which you have much of. Your clothes. You're still wearing them. Everyone sleeps in their clothes. Getting undressed to sleep is a good way to freeze or catch something worse. The linen shirt you're wearing hasn't been washed in a week, maybe two. It itches like mad. You scratch absent-mindedly and feel a scab. Could be a bite. Could be an infection. Either way, there's no doctor coming to help. You fumble around the floor, reaching for your shoes. They're stiff, crusted with old mud, and barely holding together. You slip them on and immediately feel a pebble press into your heel. Doesn't matter. You've got work to do. Your mother's already stirring by the hearth, trying to coax the embers into flame with a few splinters of kindling. Her hands are red and cracked from cold and work. She's been up since before dawn. Someone has to get the day started. Your father is muttering something in his sleep, while one of your younger siblings starts to cough. A deep, wet cough. Again. It's been weeks. Outside, a rooster calls. That's your signal. Time to get up. Time to survive another day. There's no toilet. You stumble outside to relieve yourself in a dugout trench behind the house. It's still dark, and your foot sinks into mud. Or is it something worse? The stench answers your question. You do your business quickly, shivering all the while. You don't wash your hands. You might wipe them on your tunic. Might not. There's no soap, and the water in the bucket outside is frozen over. You could crack it and splash your face, but the pain of ice-cold water isn't worth a brief moment of cleanliness. You return inside. The hearth is finally catching, smoke curling upward. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, so the smoke hangs low in the air before finding its escape. You breathe it in every day. Your lungs are used to it. Kind of. Your mother hands you a piece of bread. It's yesterday's bread. Hard, dry, and crusted with what might be mold, but she scrapes it off. There's no butter. No jam. Just bread and a sip of something warm if you're lucky, usually weak ale or a watered-down broth. That's your breakfast. That's every breakfast. And it's only been 15 minutes since you woke up. Already, you're exhausted. You don't get a shower or a coffee or a moment to scroll on your phone. You get cold air, aching bones, moldy bread, and the awareness that the hardest part of your day hasn't even started. Welcome to morning in the Middle Ages. And if you think this is bad, wait until you see what happens after breakfast. You step out of your one-room hut again, this time for work. The sun has finally breached the horizon, though it brings no warmth, just a weak gold shimmer over the frostbitten earth. The world smells of smoke and livestock and dirt. Your boots crunch the frost on the path as you pass a neighbor who doesn't even nod. Everyone's tired. Everyone's cold. Everyone's alive, for now. Your first job: fetch water. You grab the wooden yoke and two heavy buckets. The well is a decent walk away. There's no plumbing, of course. No running tap to fill a glass. Water has to be hauled, one painful step at a time, from the communal well. And if it's dry season, you walk farther. If it's winter, you pray the well hasn't frozen solid. As you reach the well, others are already there. Some villagers mumble greetings. Most don't. It's too early for cheer. The ground is slick with mud and spilled water, and you nearly fall as you brace the bucket against your knee. Crank. Splash. You fill the buckets. They're heavy. The walk back feels longer than before. Back at home, the water goes into a barrel for cooking, washing, or, let's be honest, probably just sitting there and gathering more grime. Clean water is a luxury. You drink what you have, and you try not to think about the last time the barrel was scrubbed. Your immune system isn't strong, but it is stubborn. The fire is going now. Barely. Your mother is boiling something in a cracked clay pot, maybe yesterday's stew with a few new roots tossed in. It smells like dirt and onion. She hands you a ladleful. It's hot and it burns your tongue, but it warms you a little. That's enough. Now, chores. There's no such thing as free time. You don't get to sit around, ponder life, or wonder what's trending. You chop wood if there's wood to chop. You feed the animals. You scrape manure from the floor of the animal shed. It's part of life, and it clings to everything: your boots, your hands, your soul. Maybe your family owns a pig. If you're lucky. Pigs are precious. They're warmth in the winter and meat in the spring. But they're messy, loud, and not exactly affectionate. You wrangle it back into its pen when it escapes, again. You curse under your breath. You're already tired. At some point, you tend the garden. It's not for fun. It's survival. Root vegetables, maybe some bitter greens if the frost hasn't killed them. You dig with your hands because tools are scarce, and yours broke last week. Your fingernails are caked with mud. Your back aches. There are no breaks. You might squat to rest your legs, but you're expected to keep going. Work is constant. Movement is life. If you stop, you're lazy. And lazy people don't last long. You check on your younger siblings. They're fighting over a bit of crust or whittling sticks with rocks. One of them is barefoot. Again. You yell, and your voice comes out harsh, but only because you're scared. The ground's cold. You've already buried one sibling. You don't want to dig another grave. Speaking of graves, you pass the churchyard and see a freshly dug one. There's always a fresh one. The priest is there, mumbling prayers. The village bell rings once. Another soul gone. You don't ask who. You'll find out at supper. If you make it to supper. By midday, your legs feel like they've been replaced with lead. Your shoulders burn. Your head aches from the smoke and the cold and the hunger. And it's not even close to evening. You duck into the hut to grab a bite. More bread. Maybe some old cheese. You pray for an apple, even a shriveled one. You chew slowly. Not to savor it, but to make it last. Outside, the wind picks up. A storm is coming. Your mother says you need to reinforce the roof. You grab reeds and mud and climb onto the rickety ladder. The roof groans beneath your weight. You pray you don't fall. Because if you do, there's no doctor. No ambulance. Just your family dragging you inside, hoping it's not broken. And even if it's just a sprain, that's enough to end you here. You patch the hole and climb down, exhausted. But there's still more to do. Always more. You grab the laundry, rough linen and wool, and take it to the stream. It's ice cold. Your hands go numb after minutes. You scrub anyway. Dirt, blood, waste. It all has to come out, somehow. You trudge home with the wet clothes, your hands red and trembling. You hang the clothes near the fire, knowing they'll smell like smoke, but at least they'll be dry by tomorrow. Maybe. You look around the hut. Your father is sharpening a blade. Your mother's darning a sock. Your siblings are finally quiet. For now. And you sit. Just for a moment. You sit and think, this is your life. And tomorrow, it'll be the same. And the next day. And the next. Until winter ends. Or you do. Evening descends like a thick wool blanket, dimming the gray sky into a charcoal haze. There are no electric lamps, no glowing screens. Just the last flickers of sunlight slipping behind the trees and the dull orange pulse of firelight leaking from huts across the village. The day has wrung you out, body and mind, and yet there's still more to do. Still more to endure. Your stomach grumbles, but you ignore it. Supper is soon. Maybe. If there's food. Hunger is a familiar ache, like a friend who never really leaves. You shuffle into the hut again, where the heat from the hearth barely takes the edge off the creeping cold that's sunk into your bones. Your mother is ladling stew into bowls. It's thin, little more than water, with shreds of cabbage and something you hoped was once meat. A lucky day. You accept the bowl with cracked hands and sit cross-legged on the floor. There's no table. No chairs. Everyone eats in a silent, slurping chorus, too tired for conversation, too hungry for manners. Outside, the wind howls through the thatch and whistles between the planks of your home. The hut groans like it might fall apart at any moment. And yet, this is security. This is shelter. You glance at the door, just a wooden plank on leather hinges. Not exactly burglar-proof, but who's coming to steal what little you have? After eating, you help your father haul in the animals. The pig squeals, the chickens cluck. Their body heat helps warm the room. Their smell seeps in with it. But you don't complain. You can't. Complaining doesn't change anything. And besides, no one wants to hear it. Everyone's suffering. You're not special. The younger kids settle in early. One curls up beside the hearth. Another wraps himself in a too small blanket and sucks his thumb. You remember being that small. When the world still felt magical, even if it reeked. Now, the magic is gone. All that's left is survival. Your mother mutters a prayer. A simple one. Thankful for warmth, for food, for breath. Not much else. You say nothing. You don't know if you believe. But you listen. You lie back on the straw. The same pile you woke from this morning. The fleas are still there. The itch returns. You scratch idly, too drained to care. The fire has dimmed again, casting long shadows on the soot-blackened walls. Someone starts to snore. Loud. Rattling. Familiar. Your father. You stare at the ceiling, or rather, the underside of the thatch, now dimly lit by the glow of coals. You trace patterns in the dark, just to give your brain something to do. Sleep doesn't come easily, even when you're exhausted. Not with the cold. Not with the noise. Not with the fear. You think about death. Everyone does. It's not morbid, it's normal. Will the cough in your sibling's chest take them before spring? Will the frostbite on your toe fester? Will the food hold out? You don't know. You never know. You think about what's beyond the village. Other towns, castles, wars. The king. Taxes. Plague. Everything you've heard whispered in fear or shouted by passing strangers. It all feels distant and impossibly close at the same time. Like the sky, high above, yet hanging over everything. Your mother adds another log to the fire. It cracks and hisses. She sits beside you for a moment, brushing your hair back gently. Her hand is rough, but the gesture is soft. You lean into it, just a little. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. The fire pops. And finally, slowly, sleep begins to press against your eyes. Tomorrow will be the same. The aching cold, the tasteless food, the endless chores, the gnawing uncertainty. But for now, you rest. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Sleep isn't peace. It's preparation. Another day in medieval life. And you made it. The rooster doesn't care that you slept poorly. He crows with the authority of a creature that's never worked a day in his life. The sound echoes over the village rooftops, carried by the morning fog like a herald of obligation. You blink awake in the same position you fell asleep in, flat on your back, itchy, sore, and still wrapped in the same threadbare blanket. Your mouth tastes like straw and stale air. Your stomach growls like it's trying to warn you. You sit up slowly, wincing as your knees pop. There's no stretching ritual, no morning meditation, no leisurely cup of tea. You rise because hunger drags you forward. Your mother is already moving, stirring something over the embers. Her eyes are half closed. Her hands work from memory. Everyone else still sleeps, but not for long. Up, she whispers sharply. You're not sure if it's directed at you or the pot. You shuffle to the hearth, catching a whiff of what might be food or might just be boiled cloth. The pot hisses. She stirs it again. You peer over her shoulder and see a thin, grayish gruel. Oats, if you're lucky. Boiled with water, not milk. Milk is for the babies, or the sick, or the lords who take half your animals in tax. You sit cross-legged on the dirt floor, waiting. Hunger has a rhythm. You've learned to dance to it. The stew, if it can be called that, is portioned into small wooden bowls, each chipped and blackened from fire. There's one for each of you. No seconds. No butter. No salt. Just mush. It's warm, at least. That counts for something. The first spoonful burns your tongue. The second sticks in your throat. The third finally slides down. Your belly is grateful, even if your mouth is offended. You chew with effort, knowing this might be your biggest meal today. You glance at your younger brother. He's licking the inside of his bowl, trying to catch the last of the warmth. Your mother swats at him, not out of cruelty, but because the dog is watching and he's likely to try the same. You've seen him do it. The dog usually wins. Your father enters, rubbing sleep from his face. He sits heavily, takes his bowl, and eats in silence. His hands are cracked, his nails thick with soil. He doesn't speak. No one does. Meals are not social events. They're necessary functions, like shoveling manure or burying the dead. You glance out the door. The sky is gray again. Always gray. The garden looks lifeless. The pig is making noise, hungry too. There's a tension in the air. A kind of hunger that isn't just physical. It's in the walls. In the silence. In the way everyone avoids eye contact. After breakfast, if you can even call it that, comes cleanup. You scrape the bowls clean with your fingers. There's no waste. Anything left goes to the pig, and if there's not enough for him, he screams. You wash the bowls with cold water from a barrel that smells faintly of algae. You scrub them with sand or ashes, whatever's around. You wipe your hands on your tunic. There's no towel. There's no soap. Clean is a relative concept. And that's it. That's the meal. That's the ritual. No eggs. No toast. No honey. Just hot, gray sadness in a bowl. You can't remember the last time you tasted sweetness. Not real sweetness. Maybe berries in the summer. Maybe that one time someone brought back a jar of honey from the monastery. You think about that honey sometimes. The way it clung to the spoon. The way it made even coarse bread taste like a feast. But that was a rare thing. A fleeting miracle. Breakfast is not a miracle. It's survival. And it's over. Now comes the harder part, everything else. The morning's gray light barely shifts as the hours pass. It's hard to tell what time it is. There's no clock, no bell tower in your tiny village, just instinct and routine. The sky tells you only one thing. It's not dark enough to rest, and not bright enough to hope. You've been assigned to help gather whatever food is left in the cellar. Calling it a cellar is generous. It's a hole in the ground lined with rotting boards and covered with a crooked wooden lid. Cold enough to preserve a few root vegetables, assuming the rats haven't gotten to them first. You brace yourself against the wind as you lift the lid. It sticks, frozen to the dirt around it. You tug harder. When it finally gives way, it lets out a low groan like something dying. A puff of breath escapes your lips. You descend the short ladder, the damp earth closing in like a throat. Inside, the smell is sharp, mildew, turnips, and a sour rot that hits the back of your tongue. You cough and cover your mouth. The torch you brought flickers, casting long shadows across the tiny space. You reach into a bin and pull out a potato, shriveled, soft on one side. You test it, still firm in the center. It'll do. You grab a few more, brushing away mold and bud trails. There's a sack of onions, but most are mush. One might still be edible. Your mother can stretch this with water and call it soup. Again, maybe with a sprig of thyme if she has any dried. But she probably used the last of it when your sister was sick. You climb out and recover the cellar. Your fingers are numb, Your nose is running. You wipe it with the back of your sleeve. You're not even ashamed. Everyone does it. There are no handkerchiefs, no tissues. Just sleeves. And shame doesn't grow food. Back in the hut, your mother is grinding dry grain with a stone. Her movements are steady, automatic. You hand her the potato and onion, and she nods silently. Every ingredient is an offering. Every scrap is currency. She hands you a hardened loaf of bread. You crack it into and nearly chip a tooth. It stays old, maybe weeks. You chew slowly, dipping it in water to soften it. The water tastes like wood and smoke. You chew anyway. It keeps your stomach from turning in on itself. One of the neighbors stops by. A wiry man with hollow cheeks and a perpetual scowl. He asks about flour. Offers a small rabbit in trade. You can smell it, gamey, freshly killed. Your mother hesitates. Flour is precious, but meat is rarer. She agrees. The man leaves the rabbit on the table and disappears into the fog. Your mother starts cleaning it immediately. No waste. Everything from hide to heart is used. You avert your gaze. You've seen it done 1,000 times, but it still turns your stomach. Later, the stew simmers again, this time with promise. You can smell the difference. Your siblings notice too. Their eyes light up, and for a moment, it feels like a celebration. Dinner will be better than breakfast. That's not saying much, but it's something. You spend the afternoon helping your father gather firewood. The forest is cold and damp, the trees thin and creaking. You carry a bundle of branches on your back, heavier than it looks. By the time you return, your legs are jelly. But the hut is warm now. The rabbit stew is ready. You eat slowly, carefully. The meat is stringy and wild, but delicious compared to the usual fare. You savor it. You lick your bowl. So does everyone else. You go to sleep that night with a belly that doesn't growl. It's not full, not really, but it's quiet. You count that as a blessing. Because tomorrow, breakfast will be thin again. The cold is sharper the next morning. It cuts through the wool blanket like it isn't there. You wake up with numb fingers and stiff limbs, curled tightly to preserve what little heat your body can hold. There's frost on the inside of the walls. Your breath hangs in front of you like smoke, swirling into nothing. Your stomach growls before your eyes even open. The rabbit stew from last night feels like a distant dream. A warm memory, quickly fading. Today, you're back to reality, and reality doesn't come with second helpings. Your mother's already up. Again. She hasn't slept properly in years. She moves like a ghost through the hut, preparing what little she has. You hear the scrape of wood against iron, the hiss of cold water hitting a hot pan. She's making gruel again. The same gray sludge. The same thin warmth. You sit up slowly, brushing straw from your face. The itch in your scalp is relentless. Fleas. Always fleas. You scratch without thinking, your nails rough against dry skin. You pull your tunic tighter, but it doesn't help. It's been patched too many times to count. You don't remember what color it used to be. Your siblings stir beside you. One of them coughs. That same wet, rattling cough. It never really goes away. You wonder, briefly, if this is the year it takes them. The bowls are laid out. The gruel is ladled. You sit in your usual spot, cross-legged on the dirt floor. You see nothing. Neither does anyone else. Talking takes energy you can't spare. The gruel is thinner than yesterday. Maybe there was less grain. Maybe more water. Maybe both. It tastes like nothing. It feels like less. But you eat it because it's all there is. Your little sister cries. She dropped her bowl. It cracked on the floor, spilling her portion into the dirt. She scrambles to scoop it back up, her hands shaking. Your mother stops her gently, pulls her close, and gives her her own bowl instead. You look away. You chew slower, guilt sitting heavier than the food itself. After breakfast, you're sent to the neighbor's field. They need help digging a new drainage trench before the next storm. The ground is hard, frozen in places. You use a spade with a splintered handle. Each strike jars your shoulders, rattles your teeth. You breathe hard, but it never feels like enough. By midday, your hands are blistered. Your back aches. You've earned a cup of broth and a crust of bread for your work, payment from the neighbor's wife. She smiles sadly as she hands it to you. She knows what it's worth. You do too. You eat it in silence under a tree, letting the broth warm your fingers before it warms your belly. It's thin, always thin, but it's hot. That's something. The walk back is quiet. The wind has picked up. It cuts through your clothes, chilling the sweat on your back. You pull your hood up, but it doesn't help. Nothing helps. Winter is not an event, it's a siege. At home, your mother has managed to bake flatbread from the last of the flour. She's stretching meals now, making magic out of nothing. The bread is dry, but you chew it slowly, savoring the warmth it brings to your mouth. That night, the hunger is quieter. Not gone. Never gone. But quiet. You lie in the straw and listen to your sister's breathing. Still ragged. Still worrying. You stare at the ceiling and wonder what it would be like to wake up and not think about food. To eat until you were full. To eat for pleasure, not for survival. But that's not your world. In your world, breakfast is a whisper. A thin hope. A ritual of endurance. And tomorrow, it begins again. You stink. But that's not an insult. That's just fact. Everyone stinks. In the medieval world, your nose adjusts out of necessity. It has to. There is no such thing as deodorant, no scented soaps, no floral sprays to mask the bodily realities of life. Cleanliness, at least as you know it, doesn't exist. You haven't bathed in weeks. Maybe months. No one's counting. Water is for drinking, cooking, sometimes for washing clothes, but for bathing, that's a luxury most can't afford. If you do wash, it's probably once or twice a year. And it's not a bubble bath. It's a cold splash from a wooden bucket, or a quick dunk in a stream that's colder than death and teeming with runoff from animals and waste. You scratch the back of your neck, feeling the oily buildup, the grit of dried sweat, the sting of a few well-established flea bites. You don't even flinch when you feel something crawling. You flick it away. Maybe it's a louse. Probably. Doesn't matter. You'll have more tomorrow. Your scalp is thick with grease. Your hair hangs limp, tangled, and dull. Your skin itches in places that haven't been dry in months. There's always a rash somewhere. Under the arms. Behind the knees. Between the toes. You don't talk about it. Everyone's got them. They're part of the background. Your teeth. You have them. For now. Brushing isn't a thing. You might chew on a stick sometimes, or rub ashes on your gums if someone tells you it helps. Most people lose their teeth by 30. If you're lucky, they just fall out. If you're not, they rot and fester, leaving abscesses that swell your face and rot your breath. And that's just you. Step into the village and it's a cloud of human and animal stench. The streets are not paved. They're not even properly walked. They're just mud and waste, literal waste. People toss their chamber pots out the front door. If you're not careful, you walk through it. If you're really unlucky, you're under it when it flies. Animals roam freely. Dogs, pigs, chickens. They leave their own droppings wherever they please. You don't dodge at all. Your boots are never clean. You might visit a public bathhouse if you live in a big enough town, if you have a few coins, and if you're not terrified of catching something worse while trying to get clean. Bathhouses are crowded, hot, and questionable. They're also social spaces, places of gossip, deals, and other things. Hygiene is not the primary focus. Inside the home, the air is stale. Smoke from the fire clings to everything, the walls, the roof, your skin. There's no ventilation. There's just a tiny hole in the roof where the smoke escapes and the cold comes in. The smell of mold mixes with the tang of livestock, the unwashed scent of your family, and whatever's been cooking, usually onions and roots. Lice are everywhere. They crawl in your clothes, your bedding, your hair. Nick combs exist, but they're hard to come by. Sometimes you just burn the clothes instead, or pass them down, lice and all. Your clothes are stiff. Not from starch, but from grime. Sweat, mud, and grease harden the fabric over time. Washing them is a half-day task involving icy water and ash soap, if you have it. More likely, you just beat them with rocks in a stream until they look less brown. And what about toilets? That's a good one. You use a trench behind the hut, or a hole in the ground if you're lucky. Some towns have cesspits, deep, smelly holes that someone has to clean out once in a while. That someone is either being punished or paid poorly. If you live near a castle or monastery, you might see a garderobe, a kind of vertical chute that drops waist down a wall into the moat or a channel. It's a brilliant concept until the wind shifts or the moat overflows. Toilet paper? No. You use moss, leaves, your hand, or nothing. Then you wipe that hand on your tunic. And that's how disease spreads. Hand washing? Only if there's water. Only if you're about to eat or serve food. Even then, it's a rinse, not a scrub. Soap is rare. It's homemade, harsh, and precious. You begin to understand why people die of fevers, infections, and strange illnesses no one can name. You begin to understand why plagues spread so easily. Why childbirth is so dangerous. Why wounds fester. In the medieval world, filth is not just part of life. It is life. And you're just one more body in the stink. The concept of clean meant something very different in medieval times. It didn't mean sanitized, polished, or sterile. It meant less filthy than usual, a temporary reprieve from the ever-present grime. When a festival or holy day approached, sometimes villages would attempt a general cleaning. People might wash their faces and hands, splash their feet, and maybe even rinse a few clothes in the nearest river. But it wasn't about hygiene. It was about appearances. Celebrations demanded a little effort, a little polish. Not for yourself, but for your neighbors, for the priest, for God. You might scrub your face with a handful of rough cloth in cold water. Maybe pluck some of the bigger lice from your hair. Maybe scrape your nails clean with a knife. You don your best clothes, meaning the ones with the fewest visible stains, and trudge to the village green, hoping you didn't smell quite as bad as everyone else. But the filth would still cling to you. It lived in your pores, your hair, your breath. A lifetime of smoke, sweat, and soil wasn't scrubbed away with a single rinsing. Some medieval people believed that washing too often actually opened the pores to disease. Bathing, in many minds, was a risky venture. Better to keep the dirt as armor against illness. It was folk wisdom, twisted by experience and reinforced by centuries of pestilence. The wealthier classes fared a little better. Lords and ladies had access to wooden tubs filled with warm water, perfumes, and herbal concoctions. They bathed more often, once every few weeks if they were particularly fastidious. They might even have servants to pour the water and scrub their backs. But even in castles, lice thrived, rats nested in kitchens, and bedbugs infested the grandest feather beds. Perfume became a weapon, not just to smell good, but to mask the rot of daily life. Oils, herbs, and floral waters were dabbed behind ears and onto collars to hide the sour reek of sweat. Rosemary, lavender, mint, anything sharp enough to cut through the background stench. In monasteries, hygiene took on a spiritual importance. Monks and nuns practiced ritual washing before prayers and meals. They were among the cleanest medieval people, but clean was still relative. Bathing was often a symbolic act, a washing of sins rather than of filth. Despite all the grime, medieval people weren't entirely ignorant of cleanliness. They noticed that some illnesses followed filth. They understood that clean water was better than dirty water, even if they didn't know why. Wells were prized. Springs were sacred. Pilgrimages often involved bathing in holy rivers or springs believed to have healing properties. Soap existed, too, rough, caustic blocks made from animal fat and lye. It stripped oils from skin and fabric alike, leaving hands cracked and bleeding. Making soap was a brutal, smelly business, reserved for those desperate enough to endure it. Children learned early not to expect cleanliness as comfort. Their toys, if they had any, were crusted with dirt. Their hands were perpetually brown. Their feet tough as leather. Cuts and scrapes were frequent, and infections were common. A simple scratch could fester into a fatal wound if luck wasn't on your side. And yet, somehow, they endured. Bodies adapted. Immune systems toughened. Generations lived and died surrounded by filth, weaving survival into the fabric of existence. You learn to live with the stink. You learn to breathe it in without gagging. You forget the sharp sting of clean soap, the rush of warm water, the luxury of feeling truly, deeply clean. Because in the medieval world, being clean wasn't about freshness. It was about survival. If by some twist of fortune you found yourself living in a medieval city, the concept of clean took on a new, even more chaotic dimension. Cities were denser, louder, and somehow even filthier than the countryside. Imagine walking through a medieval street. The gutters, if they existed, overflowed with refuse, animal entrails, broken pottery, human waste, discarded food. Flies clouded every corner. Rats darted through alleys, fat and fearless. The stench wasn't something that came and went. It was permanent, pressing, and inescapable. It filled your nostrils, clung to your clothes, sank into your skin. Vendors sold food by the roadside, uncovered, unwashed, swarming with insects. Fishmongers displayed catches that had been sitting in the sun for hours. Butchers hacked animals to pieces over blood-soaked planks. Everything was ripe. Everything was teeming. Even the churches, supposedly sanctuaries of order and cleanliness, were not immune. Candles filled the air with choking smoke. Pilgrims, who had traveled weeks without washing, knelt shoulder to shoulder, breathing prayers and sickness into the same stale air. Plague thrived here. Not just the Black Death, but countless smaller epidemics that swept through regularly, thinning populations before anyone understood why. Physicians, if you could afford one, advised strange treatments, bloodletting, leeches, aromatic herbs stuffed into masks. The real cause of disease, of course, was all around you. In every breath, every handshake, every mouthful. Children played in the muck. Adults trudged through it on their way to work, worship, or execution. Cities grew without planning, piling filth on top of filth. And people adapted, because they had no choice. There were attempts at regulation. Some kings and town councils issued edicts about waste disposal, throwing slop into the streets at certain hours, keeping pigs out of the markets, building rudimentary sewers. But enforcement was spotty and compliance was laughable. Life was too immediate, too harsh, for rules to matter much. At night, the city didn't quiet down, it grew more dangerous. Shadows prowled. Thieves, drunkards, and worse roamed narrow, twisting lanes. If you slipped on a pile of refuse and broke an ankle, you could bleed to death before dawn. If you caught a cough, it might linger until it killed you. If you caught something worse, you simply disappeared into the statistics. And through it all, hygiene remained a distant dream. To survive in a medieval city, you had to toughen your body and numb your senses. You had to stop noticing the filth, the smells, the persistent grit between your teeth. You had to accept that clean was not a daily achievement but a fleeting, fragile state, easily lost, rarely regained. A brief rainstorm might wash the streets clean for a day. A new well might offer slightly fresher water. A festival might inspire a burst of public bathing. But the grime always returned. It was part of the architecture, part of the bloodstream. And somehow, within that chaos, life continued. Children laughed. Lovers met. Merchants haggled. Bells rang. Cities thrived, not despite the filth, but because of the resilience it demanded. In the end, medieval hygiene wasn't about cleanliness. It was about endurance. About adapting to a world that never washed itself clean. And you would either learn to endure it, or you wouldn't last long. The rooster's call slices through the dawn mist again. Another day, another chance to survive, barely. But survival here isn't just about waking up. It's about working, and the work waiting for you outside the door is brutal, relentless, and often fatal. You're a peasant. Most people are. Your job isn't really a job, it's existence. You till the land, you sow, you reap, and you break yourself against the soil in the process. There's no such thing as a career change. No internships. No finding your passion. Your passion is now dying. The fields are your life. They stretch endlessly beyond the village, scarred with ruts and stones. You bend it to waste, hacking at the frozen ground with a heavy wooden plow, or coaxing a stubborn ox into dragging it. The blade is dull. Your arms shake. Your back screams. You haven't had a decent meal in days, but the Lord still expects his share of your harvest, even if your children starve. Blisters bloom on your palms, split open, then harden into calluses so thick you barely feel them anymore. The sun bakes you in summer, the cold gnaws at you in winter, and rain turns your fields into a sea of mud that pulls at your legs like quicksand. In the fields, accidents are common. A twisted ankle can be the beginning of the end. A deep cut from a rusty tool can turn septic. There are no workman's compensations, no emergency rooms. Just a quiet corner of the hut and hope that the fever doesn't come. If you're not in the fields, maybe you're a miller, grinding grain to feed the village. It sounds easier, standing in a mill while the great stone wheels turn. But the dust fills your lungs, grinds into your skin. You cough constantly. Your joints ache from hauling sacks of wheat and barley. If the millstone shatters, and sometimes it does, it can crush you before you even have time to scream. Or maybe you're a blacksmith, shaping iron in the heart of a furnace. The forge roars like a living thing, belching smoke and sparks. The heat is unbearable, searing your face and arms. You swing the hammer until your muscles tremble, breathing in soot and fumes until your chest burns. One slip, one poorly tempered blade, and the fire takes more than just the metal. Some trades are worse. Tanners, for instance. If you're unlucky enough to be born into a tanner's family, your life smells of death. You scrape rotting flesh off animal hides, soak them in vats of urine and dung, and tan them with foul-smelling chemicals until your skin is raw and your hair is brittle. The smell clings to you. People cross the street when they see you coming. You are necessary, but unwelcome. The butcher's trade isn't much kinder. You spend your days up to your elbows in blood and viscera, hacking apart carcasses with heavy knives, slipping on floors slick with gore. The cold bites your fingers in the winter, the flies feast on your face in the summer. Children work too. As soon as they can walk, they're sent to the fields to pick stones or scare away birds. By the time they're 10, they're expected to do a man's work. Childhood is a luxury no one can afford. And all of this, every blister, every bruise, every ache and break, is done not for wealth, not for comfort, but for survival. A bad harvest, a bad injury, a bad winter, any of these can wipe out everything you built. There's no retirement, no savings. You work until your body gives out. Then you either beg or you die. And you haven't even made it to midday yet. By midday, your muscles are screaming, your hands are cracked and bleeding, and your body is already threatening to give out. But there's no such thing as calling it a day. You push through the pain because you must. The village expects it. Your family depends on it. The earth itself demands it. If you're lucky, maybe you're apprenticed to a carpenter. Crafting things with your hands sounds almost noble until you realize you're swinging a hammer for hours on end, breathing in wood dust, and hauling beams heavier than your own body. One wrong cut, one missed strike, and you're maimed. Forever. There's no workers' comp. No surgery. Just the grim acceptance that you'll never swing a hammer again and that you might starve because of it. If you're less lucky, maybe you're a charcoal burner. Deep in the woods, you tend smoldering piles of timber day and night, inhaling thick smoke until your lungs feel like crumbling paper. You live in isolation, away from the village, considered half feral by your own people. But your charcoal is vital. Without it, the smiths can't forge, the bakers can't bake. Some jobs are so dangerous, they're almost a death sentence. If you're a miner, digging for iron or salt, you spend your days deep underground, swinging pickaxes in suffocating darkness. The air is thick with dust. The ceiling's grown. A single cave-in could bury you alive. Even if you survive, your lungs won't. Black lung creeps in quietly, a slow, painful thief. Or maybe you're a roofer, climbing rickety wooden ladders to patch the thatch on village huts. One slip, one rotten beam, and you fall. There are no soft landings in medieval life. A broken leg could mean a slow death from infection, or a quick one from being trampled in the street when you can no longer move fast enough to get out of the way. Fishermen face their own brutal world. The sea is a treacherous thing. Small, battered boats venture out at dawn, nets dragging through freezing waters. A sudden storm can flip a boat in seconds. A tangled net can pull a man under. If you make it back, you haul your catch through streets that stink of old salt and rotting fish, hoping you can sell enough to eat. And then there's the sheer monotony. Every day, the same backbreaking labor. The same tools. The same endless struggle against elements and exhaustion. Dreams of moving up our fantasies. Mobility isn't upward, it's outward. Marriage into a slightly less desperate family, or maybe joining a monastery where the labor is less fatal but still grinding. No one cares about your ambitions. No one asks about your talents. You are born into your work like an animal bred for pulling carts. Your worth is measured in bushels, in bricks laid, in fish caught, in hides tanned. You don't dream of wealth. You dream of surviving the winter, of having enough bread to see your children grow another inch, of keeping the plague from your door. And all the while, the nobility watches from their towers, clean hands, full bellies, soft beds. The difference between you and them isn't just birth. It's the weight you carry every hour of every day. The weight of survival. As dusk creeps in over the village, the shadows grow long and the air turns cold. The day's labor is over, technically. But there's no rest. Only different kinds of work. You return home with the weight of the day dragging behind you like a plow. Your body is soaked with sweat, stiff with grime, and sore in places you didn't know could hurt. There's no bath waiting. No warm meal. Just a bowl of something barely edible and a cold patch of straw to collapse onto. If your family has animals, you tend to them first. You throw slop to the pig, chase the goat back into its pen, gather the hens if any haven't been taken by foxes. One pecks your hand, again. You grit your teeth and move on. Pain is so common, you've forgotten which aches are old and which are new. Inside the hut, you might mend tools, patch holes in clothing, or repair thatch. The fire needs feeding. The floor needs sweeping. The children need scolding. Your partner hands you a cup of thin ale and half a crust of bread. You chew slowly, as if that might fool your body into thinking it's full. Around you, other villagers do the same. Silent routines. Slow movements. Not because there's peace, but because everyone's just too tired to speak. The day has wrung you out like a rag. And even now, you're thinking of tomorrow. Because there's no weekend. No holiday. Even the holy days come with tasks, processions to walk, fields to tend before prayer, meals to cook for relatives who will eat the last of your salt pork and bring nothing in return. Some workers fare worse than you. Those who serve in castles and manors, for instance. They might sleep indoors and eat slightly better, but they're at the mercy of their lords. One mistake, one perceived insult, and they're beaten, or worse. Their jobs might be less filthy, but they come with a different kind of fear. Executioners, too, hold a grim place in the labor force. Ostracized yet necessary, they carry out the sentences others decree. Most are deeply lonely, feared, avoided. Some take pride in their work. Others drink themselves numb. No one dreams of becoming one. Grave diggers, too, constantly surrounded by death. In a plague year, they dig until their hands bleed, until their backs buckle. Their work never ends, especially when the graveyard fills faster than they can keep up. And when they can no longer dig, they join the dead. For women, labor takes a different, but equally brutal, form. Childbirth is dangerous. A full day's work doesn't stop for a pregnancy or a newborn. You cook, clean, tend the garden, raise children, help in the fields. If you're a midwife, your job is sacred and terrifying. If something goes wrong, and it often does, blame finds you first. There is no safety net, no one to fall back on. Your body is the tool, the asset, the only thing keeping your family alive. And when it fails, there is no pension, no care facility, no comfort, just a quiet decline, bones growing brittle, sight fading, hands too weak to hold a spoon. Eventually, you stop being a worker and become a mouth to feed. And that's when you see pity in the eyes of the children you once fed. But tonight, you're still useful. So you take your place on the straw. You close your eyes. And you hope your back won't lock up before morning. Because tomorrow brings another shift. And no one else will do your job for you. You don't want to get sick. You really, really don't want to get sick. Because in the medieval world, illness is not a temporary inconvenience. It's not something a pill or a prescription fixes. It's a gamble, and the odds are not in your favor. A cough might be a cold, or it might be the start of a fever that boils your blood and rots your lungs. A headache might pass, or it might be a swelling behind your eye that ends in blindness. An infected cut, even a tiny one, might be your death warrant. Medical knowledge is, at best, a patchwork of superstition, guesswork, and ritual. The human body is a mystery, and most physicians are little more than educated gamblers. They speak in Latin, quote Galen and Hippocrates, and balance your humors with potions, prayers, and leeches. You're told you're sick because your blood is too hot, or your phlegm is too thick, or because you've angered a saint or walked under the wrong moon. The cures, they're worse than the disease. Bloodletting is common. They slice your arm and drain you with the hope that the sickness will leave with the blood. Too often, it leaves only your strength. Leeches are applied liberally. They're supposed to draw out the bad humors. In reality, they draw blood and leave sores. You're told to drink potions made from herbs, ground bones, even powdered insects. Some work, most don't. Some kill you faster. The barber surgeon might be your only option. He'll pull teeth, land spoils, set broken bones with a splint and a prayer. He works with a crude saw, no anesthesia, and a bucket for the blood. If you scream, no one flinches. Everyone screams. There are hospitals, if you're lucky to live near a monastery. But they're not what you think. They're places to die in peace, not places to be healed. The monks might give you bread, broth, and a bed, but they don't have the tools to save you. They might chant psalms as your fever climbs, annoy your brow as your breath rattles. Surgery is done without pain relief. You're tied to a table, held down by family members or other patients. A limb is sawed off to stop gangrene from spreading. The stump is cauterized with a red-hot iron. The smell of burning flesh makes people gag. You pass out from the pain, or you don't, and wish you had. If you live, you're lucky. If you die, you're typical. And yet, people do survive. Somehow. The body, when it can, fights back. Herbalists, often women, know the plants that soothe, the roots that help. They pass this knowledge in whispers, in secret. Sometimes the church calls them witches. Sometimes they're right. But even the best healers can't cure a plague. When it comes fast. A cough in the morning, a fever by night, black spots the next day. You die within a week. Maybe less. It spreads through the air, through touch, through water and wind. People flee, but there's nowhere to go. Entire villages vanish. Priests refuse to give last rites. Doctors flee. Families bar their doors. The sick are left in piles. The healthy pray they don't join them. There is no understanding of germs. No antibiotics. No sterilization. No hand washing. Illness is everywhere. Death is always nearby. In medicine is fear wrapped in ritual, offered with a trembling hand. It's not just the sickness that's terrifying, it's the waiting, the slow build of symptoms, the hope that this cough, this fever, this pain is something minor, that it will pass, and the creeping dread that it won't. You try home remedies first. Everyone has a few. A poultice made from crushed herbs and old superstition. A prayer to a minor saint. A charm hung above the door. Your mother swears by garlic. Your neighbor recommends boiling foxglove. Someone else suggests honey mixed with vinegar and goat's blood. None of it feels scientific. None of it is. But what else can you do? If you're lucky, you can walk to the wise woman's hut. She smells like dried flowers and sour wine. Her hands are stained from years of grinding roots. She gives you a pouch of herbs to boil. It tastes like tree bark and bile. You drink it anyway. She tells you to rest. You don't. You can't. Maybe it helps. Maybe it doesn't. But you thank her, leave a coin or a chicken, and limp back home, hoping the fever won't be worse tomorrow. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. But if it is, the real fear sets in. Your family gathers around, silent. They dab your head with a damp cloth. They feed you broth when you can swallow. They light a candle and place it near the bed, not just for light, but to prepare for what might come next. Fevers are terrifying. They bring heat that burns from within. You sweat, then freeze. You hallucinate. You mutter things that don't make sense. You forget names. You see things in the rafters. People sit by your side, watching, waiting. Your eyes glaze, your lips crack, your breath comes shallow. And yet, no one calls for a doctor. Not unless they're desperate. Not unless they're rich. Because doctors are rare. They wear long robes and masks filled with herbs. Their presence means things are already bad. They might come with books and scrolls, smelling of ink and vinegar, but they don't always come with answers. Sometimes they diagnose your illness by your urine. They examine it by color, by smell. They burn your fingernails, peer into your mouth, ask when you last saw a comet in the sky. They prescribe strange diets, more lentils, less pork, more barley, no meat, more fasting. They might advise burning sage to drive away spirits. They might bleed you again, always with the bleeding. In desperation, your family may even try relics. Pieces of saints' bones, cloth touched to a holy shrine, a vial of holy water from a distant cathedral. These are treasures passed down or begged for. They're not guaranteed to work, but they're all that's left. Meanwhile, time drags. The fever climbs. Days blur together. You forget where you are. You cry out, or go silent. And then, sometimes, a miracle happens. You wake up, weak, sweating, hollow, but alive. Everyone breathes again. The candle is blown out. The herbs are buried. The prayers become thanks instead of pleas. You're not cured, not completely. You'll be weak for weeks, maybe months. The sickness will take something from you. Your strength, your appetite, your memory. Something always stays behind. But you survived. This time, not everyone survives. And not every illness gives you time to prepare. There's the sudden kind, the kind that comes in the night like a thief. A child who was laughing that morning is stiff and cold by dawn. An elder who's weathered a dozen winters starts coughing blood and is gone in hours. Sometimes you don't even realize someone is ill until they stop breathing. And then there are the slow deaths, the long unravelings, the ones that take weeks or months. Consumption, what we now call tuberculosis, leaves a person hollow, coughing up pieces of themselves day by day. You try to care for them. You bring water, hold their hand, change their bedding. But inside, you fear them, because you know their death may be catching. There's no quarantine. Not really. The 6-day home, but the air doesn't obey doors. Sickness seeps into the floorboards, clings to the walls, rides on breath and skin. One child gets ill, then another, then the mother, the father, and soon there's silence in the house and a cart coming down the lane. Burials are hurried. Graves are shallow. Priests bless the dead from a distance. In plague years, even that is rare. Bodies are dumped in pits, covered quickly. Names are forgotten. Dates blur. You learn to live with loss. You have to. Every family has a story. The sister who wasted away, the father who died after stepping on a nail, the mother who never woke after childbirth. Grief is not an event. It is a constant, like the cold, like the hunger. Eventually, you grow used to it. You know better than to ask too many questions. Why did one person recover and another die? Why did the healer's remedies work one day and fail the next? Why did the saint answer one prayer but not yours? You stop wondering. You accept that the body is fragile, mysterious, and always half a step from ruin. You learn to spot danger early, a child who won't eat, a neighbor who's too quiet, a friend who skips market day without reason. You learn to fear the signs before the sickness fully shows itself. And so, your life becomes a ritual of prevention. You wear charms, carry herbs, avoid certain places on certain days. You listen to the seasons, to the sky, to old stories whispered by firelight. Maybe they help. Maybe they don't. But they're all you have. Still, even with all the fear, the filth, the grief, life pushes forward. There are still births, still songs, still moments of joy. A bowl of warm broth that helps a child sit up. A fever that breaks just before dawn. A healing that feels like grace. You hold on to those moments. You remember them. Because they are rare. And because in a world where medicine is more mystery than science, more hope than help, survival is a miracle. In the medieval world, the law isn't a shield. It's a blade. It hangs over your life like a sword by a fraying thread, ready to fall at the first wrong word, the first wrong look, the first wrong step. Justice here isn't about fairness. It's about power. It's about fear. It's about surviving not just nature's cruelty, but your fellow man's. The village wakes with the usual groaning stretch of another cold dawn. You step outside, your breath misting in the air, and immediately notice the crowd gathering at the square. That can mean only one thing: judgment is coming. Justice is public. It's theatrical. It's supposed to scare you straight. Lords, sheriffs, and manor courts control every aspect of legal life, and today, someone's about to be made an example. The accused is dragged into the square, bruised, bloodied, half-frozen. Maybe they stole a loaf of bread. Maybe they insulted the Lord's steward. Maybe they're just unlucky. Doesn't matter. They're here now, and the outcome is rarely in doubt. If you're a serf, like most are, you're tied to the land. You don't have the right to appeal. You barely have the right to speak. If the Lord says you're guilty, you are. If the steward says you owe a fine, you pay, even if it means selling your tools, your pig, or your daughter's dowry. Sometimes there's a trial. Witnesses are called. Not for fairness, but to satisfy a grim formality. Everyone knows who holds the real power. The Lord listens, leans back in his chair, and decides your fate based on mood, politics, and grudges. Trial by ordeal is still common. If there's any doubt, if there's any pretense of justice being served, you'll be subjected to a test designed to break you. One favorite is the ordeal by hot iron. You're forced to carry a red-hot piece of metal across a short distance. Your hand is then bound and inspected 3 days later. If it's healing cleanly, you're innocent. If it's festering, and it almost always is, you're guilty. Another is ordeal by water. You're bound and thrown into a river. If you float, it means you rejected the cleansing power of baptism and are therefore guilty. If you sink, congratulations, you're innocent. If you're lucky, someone will pull you out before you drown. Sometimes the punishment is a fine, and you limp away, poor but alive. Other times, it's not. Stocks are a common sentence, wooden frames that lock your head and hands in place. You're left in the village square for hours or days. People mock you, throw filth at you, sometimes beat you. If the night is cold enough, you can die from exposure. Branding is another punishment. Hot irons pressed against your flesh, marking you forever as a thief, a liar, a traitor. A letter carved into your skin. A living scar. Then there's mutilation, cutting off ears, slitting nostrils, gouging out eyes. The idea is simple: make you suffer, make you useless, make you a living warning to everyone else. And execution, of course. Hangings are public, meant to entertain and educate. Children watch. Vendors sell food. Priests mutter prayers. They condemn swing from a rope until they stop twitching, their shoes falling off as gravity wins. Heads are stuck on spikes by city gates. Bodies are left to rot on gibbets. The message is clear: obey, submit, fear. Appealing to the king. Good luck. It takes money, time, and connections. And kings are busy, with wars, with feasts, with their own survival. Your life is a speck on the margins of their ledger. Even the idea of guilt is fluid. If you anger someone with more power, if you owe a debt you can't pay, if a neighbor envies your harvest, they can accuse you of anything: theft, blasphemy, witchcraft. And witchcraft is the worst accusation of all. Because in that case, the evidence doesn't matter. Only the fear. Witchcraft. The mere whisper of the word is enough to destroy a life. You don't need proof. You don't need reason. All it takes is suspicion. A neighbor's cow dies unexpectedly, a child falls ill, a storm wrecks the harvest, and suddenly the village is pointing fingers. And it's often the women who bear the brunt. The old woman who lives alone at the edge of town. The midwife whose herbs smell strange. The girl who stared too long at the wrong man. Accusations spread like wildfire, fueled by fear and desperation. When things go wrong, and they always do, someone must be to blame. Once accused, you're trapped. If you protest too much, it's seen as guilt. If you stay silent, it's seen as guilt. If you flee, it's proof you have something to hide. Your best hope is a quick death. Your worst fear is the investigation. Torture is not just permitted, it's expected. Authorities believe pain reveals truth. They stretch you on racks, cross your fingers, pull your limbs from their sockets. They drive wedges under your nails. They tie you to chairs, dripping water into your mouth until you drown on air. Under agony, people confess to anything. You confess to flying on broomsticks, to cursing the harvest, to dancing with demons in the woods, to meeting the devil himself and pledging loyalty. You name names because they force you to. Because if you don't, the pain will go on forever. And in the names you give, those people are next. If you survive the interrogation, you still face trial. Another performance for the village. Another spectacle of fear. Witch tests are brutal mockeries of justice. There's the ducking stool, a seesaw contraption that plunges you repeatedly into a freezing river. If you drown, you're innocent. If you live, you're guilty. There's the prick test, where they stab you with needles, looking for insensitive spots, witches' marks. Birthmarks, scars, even pimples are considered evidence. There's weighing, where they compare your weight against a stack of Bibles. If you weigh less, it's said you're light enough to fly. The outcomes are preordained. If found guilty, and almost everyone is, the punishments are swift and horrifying. Burning at the stake is the most infamous. It's not a quick death. It's agony drawn out, every nerve screaming until merciful unconsciousness takes you. Sometimes you're hanged first. Sometimes not. Your family is shamed. Your property is seized. Your memory is blackened. Children grow up whispered about, the witch's blood still runs in their veins. And the village moves on, a little more frightened, a little more brutal. Outside of witch trials, ordinary crimes are punished with the same casual cruelty. Thieves have their hands chopped off. Highwaymen are hanged by the dozens. Vagrants are whipped through the streets until their backs are a ruin of blood and meat. And if you can't pay a fine, you're thrown into a dungeon. Dungeons are not the Gothic fortresses of stories. They're pits. Literal pits dug into castle floors. Dark, wet, and infested. You sit in chains, rotting alongside rats and other forgotten souls. Diseases fester. Madness spreads. Some prisoners are forgotten entirely, dying in darkness with no name carved on a tomb. Debtors' prisons are another hell. Entire families can be jailed if one member owes too much. Children born inside grow up chained to debts they never incurred. The lucky ones work off their sentences, laboring in the fields, hauling stones, repairing roads. Hard labor is brutal, but it's life. And life is something. You might think the church would offer protection. Sometimes it does. Sanctuary laws allow fugitives to claim safety within holy walls. But it's a temporary reprieve. If the Lord wants you badly enough, even priests might look the other way. Mercy is rare. Justice even rarer. The law doesn't exist to protect you. It exists to remind you that you are small, powerless, disposable. And every day you wake up without a summons, without a sentence, without a rope tightening around your neck, is a day you've outrun the blade. Every village has its stories. Whispers of cursed fields, haunted woods, women who turned into wolves by moonlight, and men who sold their souls for a season's good harvest. And behind every whisper, every rumor, lurks the law, ready to turn fear into punishment. Your neighbors watch you, and you watch them. Not because you're evil, not because you wish harm, but because suspicion is a form of survival. If someone must be blamed, better it be someone else. Better it be the woman with the strange laugh, the man who reads by candlelight, the family who never quite fits. Trust is a fragile thing in the medieval world. It can be broken by a poor harvest, a sick cow, a sudden storm. It can be shattered by envy, by spite, by desperation. And once broken, the law is waiting, eager to pounce. Collective punishments are common. If one person from a village defies the Lord, the entire village may suffer. Fines are levied against everyone. Crops are seized. Homes are burned. Men are conscripted into armies they'll never return from. Guilt spreads like rot. Theft isn't always about greed. Often, it's about survival. A loaf of bread stolen during a harsh winter. A chicken snatched from the Lord's coop. A bundle of firewood borrowed from the forest. Crimes of hunger. Crimes of cold. And yet, the punishments are brutal in public. There are pillories where you're locked in place for days, open to the elements and the cruelty of passing crowds. There are whipping posts where flesh is torn open in front of jeering onlookers. There are scarlet letters branded onto skin, making shame visible, permanent. Justice is not blind. It's predatory. The rich bend it to their will. The poor are crushed beneath it. Lords and bishops can commit atrocities and face only a whispered rebuke, if anything at all. A peasant who steals a loaf loses a hand. A noble who murders a servant pays a fine. And always, the spectacle. The law must be seen to be feared. Executions are carnivals of horror. Hangings in the village green. Heads spiked above the gate. Quarterings where bodies are ripped apart before a howling crowd. Burnings where flames consume flesh while hymns are sung. Children watch. They learn. They internalize the lesson, obey, submit, survive. But there are quiet resistances too. Villagers who hide fugitives in secret cellars. Midwives who heal the sick without asking for payment. Farmers who miscount the sheaves given to the Lord's steward. Tiny acts of rebellion, seeds of defiance sown in soil soaked with fear. The church preaches obedience, but even priests sometimes look the other way when injustice grows too thick to breathe. Some monks write secret chronicles, recording the brutalities they cannot publicly condemn. Truth buried under layers of parchment and prayer. The law's cruelty shapes everything, not just how you live, but how you think. You measure your words. You second-guess every glance, every gesture. You teach your children to be silent, to be invisible. Because visibility is dangerous. Attention is deadly. Injustice becomes a kind of weather, a constant storm cloud, always overhead. Some days it passes you by. Some days it strikes without warning. And you learn that survival isn't about being right. It's about being lucky. You sleep each night knowing that tomorrow you could wake to find yourself accused, condemned, punished for something you didn't do, or something you did only to stay alive. And when you pray, it's not for justice. It's for mercy. Because here, in the medieval world, the law doesn't care who's guilty, only who's vulnerable. In the medieval world, your fate is largely sealed the moment you're born, and your gender matters more than almost anything else. If you're born a girl, your life will be hard. Harder than the boys. Harder in ways that grind down your body, your spirit, and your sense of self before you've even had the chance to understand what they are. As a child, you work. You're not coddled, not shielded from the realities of survival. The moment you can walk, you're helping. Gathering firewood, fetching water, tending to younger siblings. By the time you're 5 or 6, you're learning the skills that will define your existence. Cooking, spinning, sewing, brewing ale, making butter, tending small animals. Your education, if you get one, is not about letters or numbers. It's about obedience, about efficiency, about survival. If you're a boy, you're not free either. You're expected to work the fields, learn the trades, swing a hammer or a hoe by the time your bones are barely formed enough to take the strain. Boys run messages, herd sheep, clear stones from the fields. Play is a rare luxury, stolen moments with carved sticks or a ragged ball when no adult is looking. Childhood is short. Puberty arrives, and with it, the full weight of expectation. For girls, the body becomes a battleground. Menstruation isn't a quiet, private matter. It's an announcement. You are now of marriageable age. That might be 12, 13, younger in some cases. You're suddenly valuable in a different way, as a vessel for producing heirs, laborers, alliances. Marriage is rarely a matter of love. It's a transaction negotiated by fathers, brothers, lords. Your opinion is a footnote if it's considered at all. If you're lucky, your husband will be only twice your age. If not, he's a stranger, older, harsher, already worn down by life. Consent is not a concept. Marital rape isn't a crime. Your body belongs to your husband as surely as your father's sheep belong to him. Pregnancy is constant. Childbirth is deadly. Every birth is a gamble. You might survive. You might not. You might lose the child. You might lose yourself to bleeding, fever, or a pelvis too narrow to bring life into the world. There's no pain relief beyond biting a cloth and gripping a midwife's hand until your fingers break. And if you survive, the cycle begins again. Bear children. Bury some. Try again. For boys, adolescence means harder labor, harsher punishments, the looming threat of conscription. A lordswoman can tear you from the fields and throw you into a battlefield you don't understand, fighting for a cause you've never heard of. If you're strong, you might be apprenticed to a craft if your family can pay the fee. If not, you're locked into the brutal rhythm of field work or sent to live as a servant in another man's house, where beatings are frequent and thanks are rare. Children are precious because they are few. Infant mortality is staggering. Half of all children die before their 5th birthday. Illness, injury, hunger, the world conspires to cut young lives short. Mothers wrap newborns in swaddling bands, binding arms and legs tight to protect against deformity and spirits. Superstition fills the gaps where medicine fails. Charms against fairy stealing, prayers to ward off evil eye, talismans hidden in cradles. When children die, there's grief. Deep, raw grief. But there's also resignation. You don't have the luxury of endless mourning when survival demands your hands be steady enough to milk cows and gather firewood. The death of a child leaves scars on the soul, but life must go on. Grief is woven into the everyday fabric of survival. Mourning is quiet, practical. There are no elaborate funerals for most village children, a small grave dug at the edge of the churchyard, a hasty prayer murmured by a priest already thinking about his next task. The family weeps, yes, but they also gather water, mend clothes, till fields. Time doesn't stop for sorrow. For the children who survive, life hardens them early. Girls learn that their worth is tied to their ability to labor and to bear children. Good daughters are obedient, modest, tireless. If they are clever, they hide it. If they are strong, they soften it. A loud girl draws attention, and in a medieval village, attention can be dangerous. If a girl's family is particularly poor, she might be fostered to another household, sent to serve as an unpaid helper. Sometimes it's a better life, offering food and shelter. Sometimes it's just another layer of hardship, another pair of rough hands to obey. Boys, too, are taught to endure. They learn to swing tools that outweigh them, to herd stubborn animals, to kneel when lords pass by. A strong back and a silent mouth are their most prized possessions. In some rare cases, boys with a glimmer of talent, a knack for letters, a sharp mind, might be noticed by a priest or a minor lord. They could be sent to a monastery school, taught to read, perhaps even rise to the clergy. But for most, education ends at knowing how to count sacks of grain and recite prayers. Marriage is not just a rite of passage, it's an economic transaction. For girls, marriage comes young. Dowries are negotiated: a pig, a patch of land, a few coins. Families with little to offer often marry daughters to older men who can afford to feed another mouth. Love is not part of the contract. Once married, a woman's entire existence is service. Service to her husband, her children, her lord. Her body is not her own. Her labor is not her own. Even her dowry can be seized if her husband wishes. Widowhood is both a curse and a freedom. If a woman's husband dies, she gains a sliver of independence, the right to manage her household, perhaps remarry if she chooses. But she also gains vulnerability. Without a man's protection, she is easy prey for accusations, harassment, and exploitation. In the cities, life for women and children offers slightly different opportunities and different dangers. Girls might work as laundresses, seamstresses, vendors. Boys might apprentice to bakers, smiths, or butchers. But urban life brings new risks: crowded tenements ripe for fires, streets filled with filth, outbreaks of disease that spread like wildfire. Children in cities often live shorter, harsher lives. They are lost to fevers, to accidents, to starvation. Or they vanish into the underworld, becoming thieves, beggars, or worse. In both villages and towns, the church looms large over the lives of women and children. Religious instruction teaches obedience, submission, fear of sin, fear of the body, especially the female body, seen as a source of temptation and corruption. Girls are warned from an early age that their virtue is their only armor, and once lost, it can never be regained. Virginity is prized. Chastity is policed. A girl who becomes pregnant outside of marriage is cast out, shamed, sometimes worse. Her child, if allowed to live, is branded a bastard, denied rights and dignity. And yet, despite all this, women and children find ways to carve small joys from the stones of their lives. A mother singing to her infant by the hearth. Children chasing each other through fields after the day's chores are done. Sisters weaving garlands from wildflowers. Boys carving wooden toys with stolen bits of time. Laughter still rings out, even when the world seems determined to silence it. Hope, fragile and fleeting, persists. Because it must. There's no monument to the invisible labor of women and children in medieval life. No songs written about the girl who woke before dawn to bake bread or the boy who carried water until his spine curved like a bow. But their work sustains everything. The noble woman in the castle may sit on cushions and dictate meals, but even she is bound. Her marriage is political. Her role is defined by her fertility, her husband's ambitions, and her ability to maintain appearances. She is both privileged and imprisoned. A pawn in embroidered silk. Peasant women are the spine of the village. They wake before the sun, sleep long after it sets, and fill every hour with motion. Hauling water, kneading dough, mending clothes, scraping ash from the hearth, feeding livestock, nursing children, weaving, brewing, teaching, mourning. In their hands rests the rhythm of survival. Girls grow up watching this. Boys do too. The labor is so ingrained, so relentless, that no one questions it. No one asks if it should be different. It simply is. And when war comes, because it always does, women hold what's left together. They plant the fields when the men are gone. They hide the children when soldiers march past. They barter, beg, and scavenge. And they wait. Always, they wait. For a husband who might never return. For a son who might come home maimed. For peace that might never last. Children are the future only if they survive. And even then, that future is narrow. If you are lucky, you grow old. If you are very lucky, you see grandchildren. You pass down knowledge: how to sew a tear in a hem, how to trap rabbits, how to tell which mushrooms won't kill you. Stories pass by firelight, some with morals, some with warnings, all heavy with the weight of lived experience. There's love here too, though history often forgets it. The love between a mother and her child, fierce and terrified. The bond between siblings who know nothing but each other. The quiet understanding between two girls whose eyes meet across a wash line, both dreaming of something more. The way a father lays a hand on his son's shoulder after a day of work, wordless but full of pride. Affection exists. Tenderness survives. Not everywhere. Not always. But enough. Enough to spark rebellion in the smallest acts: a shared crust of bread, a forbidden smile, a lullaby hummed under breath. The world presses down on women and children with unforgiving weight. But still, they live. Still, they find ways to endure. to soften the edges, to dream, if only for a moment. And that matters. Because when history records kings and battles and laws, it often forgets the hands that churned the butter, that rocked the cradle, that buried the dead. But without those hands, nothing would have survived. Not the homes, not the fields, not the future. In medieval life, faith isn't a private choice. It's an atmosphere, a constant, inescapable force that seeps into every crack of your existence. From the moment you are born, baptized within days to ward off damnation, to the moment you die, clutching a wooden crucifix and gasping final prayers, religion wraps itself around you like an invisible chain. Fear is stitched into the fabric of faith. The church teaches that life is suffering, that this world is a place of trial, and your true reward, or eternal punishment, waits beyond the grave. Every action, every thought, is weighed by an unseen God who watches constantly, judges relentlessly, and punishes without warning. Hell is not a distant threat. It's a vivid, detailed nightmare etched into your mind by sermons, plays, art. You've seen the paintings, twisted demons raking sinners over fire, monstrous beasts chewing through souls. You've heard the priests describe eternal agony in chilling detail. You believe it. How could you not? Superstition fills the gaps where understanding fails. The woods are haunted. The rivers are cursed. The night is filled with witches, fairies, demons. Every shadow is suspect. Every strange noise a warning. You carry charms sewn into your clothes, scraps of saints' bones, splinters of holy wood, tiny crosses carved from bone. You whisper prayers under your breath when passing certain trees, crossroads, graveyards. You mark doorways with blessed chalk. You leave offerings of bread and milk to appease unseen forces. You fear the devil not just as an abstract idea, but as a real, tangible being lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight. The church controls not just your soul, but your calendar. Holy days dictate the rhythm of the year, feast days, fast days, saints' days. There are more days off than in the modern world, but they are filled with obligation, attending mass, participating in processions, honoring relics, confessing sins. And sin is everywhere. You can sin by thought, by word, by deed. You can sin by omission, by failing to act, failing to pray, failing to honor the saints properly. You can sin without even knowing it, and ignorance is no excuse. The priest is your guide and your warden. He hears your confessions, metes out penance, intercedes with God on your behalf. He knows your family's secrets, your petty sins, your failures. He holds your soul's fate in his hands. A good priest is a comfort. A corrupt one is a tyrant. And yet, for all the fear, faith also offers hope. The promise of salvation. The idea that suffering here buys bliss hereafter. The belief that prayers can heal, that miracles can happen, that saints watch over the faithful. You cling to that hope. Because without it, the darkness is unbearable. Fear of the unknown shapes daily life. Every misfortune, every bad harvest, every sudden sickness, every infant death must have a cause. And often, the cause is not seen as random chance. It is seen as punishment, as judgment, as the devil's work. If your crops fail, you wonder if you missed a holy day. If your child falls ill, you whisper prayers and wonder if God is testing you, or if some unseen sin festers in your household. To guard against unseen forces, you embrace rituals. When a new home is built, a priest blesses the ground. When a baby is born, the midwife murmurs prayers alongside her work. When a field is plowed, it's sprinkled with holy water. Before a journey, travelers touch relics or carry blessed tokens. Superstitions tangle with doctrine. You believe in saints, but you also believe in will-o'-the-wisps leading travelers astray. You light candles to honor the Virgin Mary, but you also leave bread at the forest's edge just in case. You celebrate Easter, but you also fear the first full moon of spring, when witches are said to ride the night sky. Miracles are sought at every turn. The sick are carried to shrines miles away, hoping for a cure. Pilgrims walk for weeks, barefoot and bleeding, to kiss relics. Monasteries claim to house shards of the true cross, drops of saintly blood, the bones of martyrs. You want to believe. You need to believe. Because the alternative, that life is random, cruel, and meaningless, is too terrible to endure. Religious plays and festivals reinforce the lessons. During feast days, the village gathers to watch performances of morality tales, Satan tempting a virtuous soul, the damned drag screaming to hell, the saint descending to heaven. The costumes are crude, the acting rough, but the messages are clear. Goodness means obedience. Sin brings suffering. There is little room for questioning. Those who doubt too loudly are watched. Those who ask too many questions are shunned. Heresy is not just dangerous for the soul, it's dangerous for the community. If God punishes sinners collectively, as many believe, one person's doubt could doom an entire village. Thus, you police yourself. You police others. Suspicion is survival. Whispers start easily. She never comes to Mass. He muttered curses after the last frost. Their child died too suddenly, surely a judgment. The line between piety and paranoia blurs quickly. Sometimes you fast not out of faith, but out of fear. Sometimes you pray not out of devotion, but out of desperate self-defense. The sacred and the superstitious weave together until they are indistinguishable. And so your days are a dance between hope and terror, between salvation and damnation, between light and a darkness so deep it feels like it's watching you breathe. The church is not just your spiritual guide, it is the law, the doctor, the judge, the teacher. It decides what is right and wrong. It decides what is true and false. And it decides who is damned. You are taught to believe without question. Heresy, even a whispered doubt, is not just a personal failing. It's a crime. A dangerous infection that must be cut out before it spreads. Inquisition courts exist to hunt heretics. Their methods are brutal. You are summoned, interrogated, tortured if necessary. You are asked impossible questions. Do you renounce your secret sins? Do you confess to meetings with the devil? Do you name your fellow conspirators? If you confess, you may be shown mercy, a long pilgrimage, a heavy fine, public penance. If you refuse, you risk death. You might be burned alive for your soul's salvation. And the village watches, not with joy, but with a grim sense of necessity. Better one be sacrificed than many be punished. Better to fear together than to question alone. Fear keeps the village in line. Fear that God is watching. Fear that the devil is lurking. Fear that your neighbors are watching, too. And so you go to Mass. You fast on Fridays. You kneel when told. You cross yourself at every sound in the night. You obey the priest, the bishop, the king. Your personal faith might be deep and sincere, or it might be hollow and terrified. But outwardly, it looks the same. Still, amidst all this fear, there are moments of true devotion. The beauty of Gregorian chants echoing through a stone cathedral. The smell of incense curling through the air during Easter Vigil. The first glimpse of sunrise on Christmas morning, promising rebirth and hope. In those moments, faith feels less like a cage and more like a light in the darkness. And it is these moments, rare, fragile, luminous, that keep you moving forward. Because in a world of cruelty and superstition, you need something to hold on to. Something greater than fear. Something holy. Even if you must clutch it with trembling hands. If you imagine medieval life as an endless cycle of work, hunger, and survival, you're not wrong. But even in a world defined by scarcity, people still found time for recreation, though it was often rough, risky, and laced with a kind of brutality that makes modern fun look like a lullaby. You didn't have hobbies in the way we understand them. You had diversions, brief breaks in the storm, fleeting moments to laugh, to gather, to release the pressure that came with surviving day by day. Festivals were the cornerstone of medieval entertainment. Dozens dotted the year, from saint days to solstices, harvest celebrations to royal weddings. These were the rare times when work stopped, or at least paused, and the village gathered in force. You decorate the square with garlands, play music with whatever instruments you could muster, flutes, drums, crude fiddles. People danced. Not graceful ballet, but loud, stomping reels fueled by ale and adrenaline. Bare feet kicked dust, skirts twirled, voices rang out into the sky. Food was shared, boiled grain, meat if there was any, sweet meats on lucky days. Children darted between grown-ups, snatching scraps, chasing each other with sticky hands. Old women gossiped in tight circles. Men challenged each other to feats of strength, wrestling, lifting stones, running races barefoot over dirt paths. But fun wasn't always safe. One of the most popular entertainments, animal baiting. A bear, chained in the village square, tormented by dogs trained to attack. Spectators jeered and cheered as the bear roared, the dogs barked, and blood soaked into the earth. Bulls, too, were baited, chased through the streets, stabbed and prodded until exhaustion claimed them. People called it sport. You might see a cockerel fight another to the death. You might wager your coin on which dog would survive the match. Gambling was common. Coins, goods, even personal favors changed hands in the heat of bloodsport. It wasn't just animals who suffered for entertainment. Public executions were highly attended, especially when the condemned was notorious. People packed the square early to get a good view. Food vendors hoffed pies and ale. Children were hoisted onto shoulders. Hangings, beheadings, and burnings drew the biggest crowds. You didn't look away. You couldn't. Everyone watched. It was considered necessary, a civic duty wrapped in spectacle. There were games, too, crude versions of football where villages squared off in sprawling, violent scrums that spanned fields and lasted hours. The ball might be a pig's bladder. There were few rules. Injuries were expected. Board games existed, chess, dice, and card-like games scribbled on scraps of parchment, but these were rare luxuries, often reserved for the wealthier classes. Most villagers passed the time by telling stories, singing bawdy songs, or gathering around fires to share gossip, ghost tales, and legends. Music was everywhere, but it was raw and unpolished. Drums thumped, flutes whistled, and voices rose in joyful or drunken unison. Lyrics weren't clean. They weren't meant to be. Songs told of lust, betrayal, absurdity. You sang loud, off-key, and without shame. Dancing was for all. It wasn't graceful, it was communal. You clapped your hands, stomped your feet, twirled your neighbor whether they wanted it or not. For a few minutes, the aches and the hunger faded, replaced by sweat and rhythm. Because when you live in a world that doesn't care if you make it to tomorrow, you learn to dance today. The line between celebration and chaos was thin. During festivals, especially those fueled by seasonal change or religious milestones, rules often slipped. The ale flowed freely, and so did tempers. A feast might begin with dancing and end with broken noses and bruised egos. The social order blurred, the poor mocked the rich in playful skits, women teased men with riddles and rhymes, and children ran wild until they collapsed in the straw. One of the most infamous celebrations was the Feast of Fools. During this topsy-turvy event, commoners dressed as clergy, bishops wore jesters' caps, and sacred spaces became stages for parody and satire. The church tolerated it begrudgingly. It was a pressure valve, a way for the people to laugh at authority without dismantling it. Masquerades were rare but magical. Handmade masks turned neighbors into strangers and strangers into stories. People became beasts, saints, demons, or gods. You could confess a crush, declare a grudge, or pull pranks without consequence, all hidden behind carved wood and painted cloth. But fun also had darker undertones. Superstition wove itself into the celebration. Fire jumping was done not just for joy, but to ward off evil. Bonfires weren't just festive, they were protective. People whispered blessings over their ill, carved symbols into bread, left pieces of food for spirits that might wander through the night. Young people invented their own games. Some were innocent, tag, blindman's bluff, riddles. Others were not. There were drinking contests, dares that ended in bruises, love games that became awkward when jealousy took root. A stolen kiss could lead to gossip, or a marriage, or a knife fight. There were contests of storytelling. Whoever could spin the wildest tale, the bawdiest joke, the cleverest insult, earned applause and pride. A traveling bard, if one passed through, was like a spark in dry grass. People crowded around to hear songs of kings, saints, dragons, lovers. For a few silver coins or crust of bread, you could forget your sore feet and starving stomach in favor of glory, laughter, and song. And of course, there was theater. Morality plays were the most common. You watched actors dress as vices and virtues, acting out sins and punishments in exaggerated pantomime. Greed would wear a fat suit. Lust might carry a feathered mask. The devil always got the best lines. These plays were equal parts sermon and entertainment, a reminder to behave, but also a welcome break from field work. Seasonal events held their own rituals. May Day brought flowers and fertility rites. Spring dances around the maypole were not innocent gestures. They were heavy with symbolism, with the planting of seeds, with renewal. Harvest festivals involved eating as much as you could before winter shrank everything again. Winter solstice was a time of fire, noise, and drinking away the fear that the sun might never return. Even weddings were more brawl than ballet. You'd celebrate for days, eating, drinking, dancing, and occasionally fighting. The bride might be kidnapped by pranksters and ransomed. The groom might be stripped and painted with soot. It was rough fun, chaotic, often cruel, but memorable. Laughter in the medieval world didn't didn't sound like it does today. It was louder, rawer, more desperate. It had to be. Because when every day brought blisters, frostbite, and loss, fun wasn't an indulgence. It was resistance. Not all entertainment was loud. Some pleasures were quiet, slow, woven into the ordinary hours of the day. You might mend clothes with a neighbor and share a story. You might sit beside the hearth, combing lice from your child's hair while humming an old folk tune passed down through generations. You carved toys from scraps of wood. You played dice games in the dirt. You told riddles that made no sense and laughed anyway. You found shapes in the clouds and faces in the flames. You lived in a world with no screens, no stage lighting, no orchestras, and yet you were surrounded by stories. Storytelling was an art form that bound entire communities together. At night, by firelight, the old man with the good memory might recall tales of knights and monsters, of saints and sinners, of star-crossed lovers and foolish kings. The children listened wide-eyed. The elders nodded, hearing echoes of their youth. No one cared if the details changed. The bones of the story mattered more than the truth. Music, too, didn't require instruments. A rhythm tapped on a wooden table. A whistle blown through cupped hands. A chorus of voices rising in unison, whether for a prayer, a work song, or a drunken celebration. Songs helped you dig trenches, grind grain, walk long distances, give birth, and bury the dead. In the monasteries and cathedrals, you might hear chants, long, echoing hymns that seemed to melt into the stone. They weren't always joyful, but they were transcendent. They offered a sense of awe that was its own kind of pleasure, sacred and shiver-inducing. And in between the noise and the silence, there was the feast. Food might not be abundant, but during festivals it flowed more freely. Communal feasting was a kind of sacred joy, not just about eating, but about eating together. Sharing bread, passing bowls, savoring meat, honey, ale, spiced cider, or whatever seasonal treat had been saved for that day. For some, it was the only time they felt full. Even gossip was a form of fun, a dangerous kind, yes, but irresistible. Who was courting whom? Who was seen at the wood's edge? Who had been cursed by the old woman in the crooked hut? Every tale came with a raised eyebrow, a smirk, a caution. And then, when the sun finally fell, the stars came out, and with them, wonder. You looked to the heavens not just for beauty, but for meaning. Shooting stars, blood moons, strange alignments, they weren't just beautiful, they were signs. You point, you whisper, you'd make up stories on the spot and pass them on. It didn't matter that science would later prove you wrong. It mattered that you were looking up, imagining, connecting. Because imagination was its own rebellion. In a world of dirt and death, imagination was flight. And fun, whether through stories, games, music, or madness, was how you reclaimed some part of yourself. Not the part that toiled. Not the part that obeyed. But the part that felt. And even in a time when joy was brief and often costly, it mattered. Because it reminded you that you were still human. In the medieval world, travel isn't a right. It's a risk. You don't wake up one morning and decide to take a scenic walk to the next town. There's no leisure in movement, no comfort in the journey. You travel only when you have to, when forced by hunger, war, marriage, pilgrimage, or exile. And when you do, it's not an adventure. It's a gamble. The roads are not paved. They're dirt, mud, rock, and worse. After rain, they become bogs. In dry seasons, they're choking clouds of dust. You walk. Always walk. Unless you're very rich or very lucky. If you have a horse, it's probably pulling a cart, not giving you a ride. Distances are deceptive. A journey that takes an hour today by car might take a full day or more on foot. From village to village, maybe 10 miles, feels like an odyssey. You leave at sunrise and hope to arrive before dusk. If you don't, you'll have to sleep on the road, and that means danger. Because the road doesn't care. There are bandits. Actual, desperate men with knives and clubs who live off what they steal and who wouldn't think twice about robbing or killing a lone traveler. There are wild animals, wolves, boars, even bears in some regions. There are no rangers, no patrols, no help. And then there's the weather. It's your constant enemy. Rain turns paths into rivers. Snow blocks entire valleys. Heat drains you. Cold cracks your skin. Shelter is rare, often occupied, or costs more than you can afford. You carry everything on your back: food, water, a blanket, maybe a knife. Your shoes are thin and worn. Your clothes offer little protection. Every step blisters. Every hour tightens your muscles. Every day on the road erodes your strength. You might travel in groups, safer, yes, but not always friendly. Companions can turn sour, especially when food runs low. Pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, thieves, all walk the same roads, but not all walk with the same intentions. And don't get lost. There are no maps for people like you. No signs. No markers. You follow worn paths and hope someone at a crossroads can point the way. If they're honest, if they're sober, if they're not planning to lead you astray. The world outside your village feels vast and hostile. Each town speaks its own dialect. Each forest is rumored to be haunted. Each river crossing might demand a toll you can't pay. And toll collectors don't ask nicely. Castles loom in the distance, but they don't offer shelter. Lords don't open their gates to strangers. Monasteries might, if you're quiet, penitent, and carry no disease. Pilgrimage is one of the few reasons travel is accepted, even blessed. You walk to a shrine, a holy relic, a cathedral said to house the bones of a saint or a tear of the Virgin. You carry your sins on your shoulders. You hope each mile buys you a bit of forgiveness. Pilgrimage routes form a kind of medieval highway, dotted with inns, churches, and hospitals. But even then, the road is no safer. And not all pilgrims are pious. Because when people are desperate for redemption, for food, for a new start, they'll travel. And desperate people make dangerous travelers. If you're poor, and most people are, you travel out of necessity, not choice. You might be a wandering laborer, looking for seasonal work. A field that needs harvesting. A wall that needs building. You carry your tools on your back and hope someone will feed you in exchange for your strength. But you're not welcome everywhere. Villages are suspicious of strangers. Strangers bring stories. Strangers bring crime. Strangers bring plague. When you arrive at a town's edge, you wait at the gate. If there is a gate. Some towns have guards. Others have watchmen. Most have gossip, someone always watching, always whispering. You might need to pay a fee to enter, especially if you're traveling with goods. You might be turned away. You might be allowed in, but watched, followed, questioned at every turn. Markets are one of the few places where travel feels almost normal. They buzz with sound and stink, shouting vendors, braying animals, spilled ale. Merchants move between towns, trading cloth, salt, spices, dried fish. They bring stories of far-off lands, of kingdoms at war, of queens with gold thread gowns. To you, it sounds like magic. But travel for merchants is no less risky. Their carts are heavy targets. Their money draws knives. Caravans travel together, with guards when they can afford them. And even then, many don't make it home. Religious travelers fare slightly better, not because they're safer, but because they're pitied. Pilgrims wear badges showing their destination, a shell for Santiago, a palm for Jerusalem. These symbols don't protect them, but they might earn a crust of bread or a spot in a churchyard for the night. Hospitals, more like hostels than medical centers, are scattered along popular pilgrimage routes. Run by monks or charitable guilds, they offer a bed of straw, a bowl of gruel, sometimes even a bath. They're rare pockets of mercy in a world full of locked doors. Still, being on the road means being exposed. You hear things, the scratch of something following in the woods, the cry of wolves, the crunch of footsteps behind you. You sleep with your knife under your head and one eye open. You wake to frost on your blanket, dew on your lips, and the knowledge that your next meal depends on your next smile. You pass corpses sometimes. Men who didn't make it. Bandits who picked the wrong target. Outlaws strung up at crossroads, their bodies left to rot as warnings. The crows don't mind. Neither do the insects. You see gallows on the horizon. Shrines made of bone and cloth. Roadside crosses with names carved in haste. Travel is a quarter of fear stitched together by brief moments of relief. Sometimes a stranger shares a fire. Sometimes you find a stream clean enough to drink from. Sometimes a child waves at you from a field and you remember that the world is not all shadow. But the next bend could bring trouble. So you keep walking. Not because it's safe, but because there is no other way forward. There are those who travel not by choice, but by command. Soldiers march where they are ordered, sleeping in ditches, eating spoiled rations, dying in lands they've never heard of. Their feet blister inside armored boots. Their backs ache beneath the weight of weapons and fear. They march in formation, but they die alone. Messengers, too, walk long miles, bearing letters between lords, warnings between castles, secrets between kings. They travel fast, light, and often under cover of darkness. One wrong turn, one intercepted scroll, and they vanish, taken by the very forces they were meant to outrun. Then there are the exiles. People cast out from their homes for crimes real or imagined. A woman accused of theft. A man accused of heresy. A family shunned after illness strikes. They walk with nothing but shame on their backs in every village ahead waiting to close its gates. And what about traders? Those who brave the longest roads, through forests, mountains, swamps, to carry salt, silk, amber, or wine across dangerous terrain. They are part merchant, part diplomat, part survivor. They speak many tongues, offer gifts to many gods, and know how to read not just the stars, but the eyes of the men watching them from the trees. Travel changes you. It roughens your hands, your feet, your judgment. You learn to pack light, to trust slowly, to sleep with your back against stone. You grow suspicious of silence, wary of kindness, and grateful for a crust of bread. You meet people who become stories, a woman who shared her fire, a boy who gave directions without asking for coin, a dying man who begged only for prayer. And you meet people who become warnings. Travel teaches you how small you are. The world is bigger than your village, but also meaner. It is more beautiful, too, wildflowers blooming along a forgotten road, deer leaping through mist, a cathedral rising from the earth like it was carved by angels. But none of that beauty is safe. No one travels far without cost. Even when you reach your destination, if you reach it, you are changed. Thinner, harder, wiser, or more broken. And often, you find the place you long for isn't what you dreamed. Maybe you sought work and find only rejection. Maybe you sought healing and find only waiting. Maybe you sought God and find only silence. Still, people keep moving. Because hope is stubborn. Because desperation is louder than fear. Because staying still is sometimes the greater danger. And so, in a world without maps, without guides, without certainty, people still walk. On pilgrimage. In exile. For trade. For safety. For redemption. One foot in front of the other. Because even if travel breaks you, standing still might bury you. If you think being noble in the Middle Ages meant living a life of ease and luxury, you're only half right. Yes, they had more food, more clothing, more protection, and far more power, but life for the nobility wasn't a fairy tale. It was still brutal, still dangerous, and very often, profoundly miserable. Let's start with the basics. If you're a noble, you live in a castle. That sounds glamorous until you realize that castles are cold, dark, damp fortresses. The walls are stone, the floors are stone, and the air smells like smoke, mildew, and unwashed bodies. Your bed might have furs and pillows, but there's no indoor plumbing, no insulation, and no privacy. Bathing? Still rare. A warm bath might be prepared once a month, and the servants who prepare it will use the water after you. Your chamber pot is dumped out a window or into a cesspit. The smell hangs in the halls like a permanent guest. Still, you eat better. Bread that's finer, meat that's salted or spiced, cheese that doesn't crawl on its own. You drink wine or strong ale instead of dirty water. You host feasts that last for hours, multiple courses, entertainers, dancing. It's decadent, but not necessarily comfortable. Meat spoils. Food poisoning is common. The servants are overworked. The kitchens are chaos. And there's always the looming threat of politics. You don't inherit a title and live happily ever after. You inherit enemies, rival families, petty lords, jealous cousins. Every alliance you form is a fragile dance, sealed with marriages you don't choose and promises you can't keep. If you're a noble woman, your fate is almost entirely out of your hands. You're married young to a man you've likely never met, sent to a castle you've never seen, and expected to bear heirs, manage the household, and stay silent. If your husband dies, you might gain some freedom, or be quickly remarried to someone even worse. And war is always a heartbeat away. Castles are not just homes, they're military outposts. At any time, you might be called to defend your land. That means training, strategy, armor, blood. You don't have to swing a sword, but many noblemen do. And many noblemen die young, not just in battle, but from infections, accidents, or assassination. Because power doesn't just attract privilege. It attracts danger. When you're noble, your entire life is performance. Every garment, every gesture, every word is part of a game you didn't invent, but must play to survive. Your clothes are elaborate, silks, velvets, brocades dyed with rare colors. But they're heavy, stiff, and expensive to maintain. You don't wear them for comfort. You wear them to show wealth, to show allegiance, to prove that you're not one of them, the peasants. Your days begin with ritual. You rise when servants arrive to dress you, wash your face, comb your hair. You don't bathe often, but you do mask your scent with oils and herbs. The air around you smells like lavender, rose water, or, in wealthier households, imported spices. Not because you're clean, but because you're expected to seem clean. Meals are formal. You don't eat with your hands, and you don't just dig in. There's a ritual to serving, to toasting, to carving meat. There are rules about who sits where, who eats first, who gets what dish. Violate them, and you risk offending someone with more influence than you. Education is a privilege, but it's not necessarily empowering. You're taught Latin, rhetoric, religious doctrine, and heraldry, not because you're expected to think critically, but because you're expected to recite, to memorize, to perform intelligence like another layer of costume. Girls might learn music, embroidery, and how to manage a household. Boys might learn swordplay, estate management, and diplomacy if their tutors are competent in their parents' care. Religion dominates your schedule. Mass in the morning, prayer before meals, special observances for saints' days. Your family might sponsor a monastery or donate land to the church, not out of generosity, but to secure power, favor, and divine insurance. Because the higher you rise, the further you have to fall. A minor scandal can undo your family. A whispered rumor, a forged letter, a poorly timed remark at a feast. Courts are nests of spies and sycophants. A rival can destroy you with nothing but a nod and the right rumor. And ambition is dangerous. If you gain too much power, the king may see you as a threat. If you lose too much land, your peers may carve you apart. You're always negotiating marriages, inheritances, truces. Every letter you send is a chess piece. Every friend you trust might become an enemy. Even peace is a performance. You attend tournaments, hosting visiting lords and their entourages. The joust is not just a game, it's a message. Who rides? Who wins? Who bleeds? A nobleman's broken collarbone might shift the balance of power in 3 counties. And the common folk watch from behind fences, hungry, muddy, wide-eyed, both in awe and resentment. You are admired and hated in equal measure. Because while you might suffer under silks and obligations, they suffer under hunger and cold. And no matter how brutal your world is, theirs is worse. There's wealth, but there's also expectation. As a noble, your time isn't your own. You're expected to attend every feast, respond to every summons, and present a flawless version of your family's legacy at all times. You are never alone. Not really. Servants hover. Advisors whisper. Courtiers linger, waiting for a slip, a rumor, a weakness they can twist into advantage. You don't farm, but you must manage estates, vast fields worked by peasants whose names you don't know but whose hunger you profit from. Taxes must be collected. Quotas must be met. Harvests must be tallied. If the yield is low, the lord suffers politically, but the peasants suffer physically. If you're high-ranking, you might be called to court, the king's court, a hotbed of ambition and treachery. You dress your best, flatter the right people, pretend not to hear the insults behind your back. Everyone smiles. Everyone lies. Alliances are made over goblets and broken with knives. Marriages are the currency of power. You marry to secure land, titles, heirs. Love is irrelevant. Often, your spouse is a stranger, or worse, a known enemy. And once wed, there's no escape. Divorce doesn't exist. Annulment is rare. You endure, or you disappear. Your children are pawns before their people. The heir is groomed for command. The spares are maneuvered into the clergy or the military. Daughters are dressed, drilled, and treated like chess pieces. Their opinions don't matter, only their dowries do. A daughter's worth is measured in acres, alliances, and obedience. And if you fail, if you fall from favor, lose a war, or back the wrong side in a succession crisis, you could lose everything, your land, your title, your life. One royal frown, one forged document, one bad harvest too many, and your family name becomes a cautionary tale. Yes, you feast more. You freeze less. You don't toil in the fields. But you bleed just as red when war comes. You age under the same unkind sun. You sleep with one eye open, same as the bandits you condemn. You live in a cage made of gold and gossip. And for every velvet curtain and goblet of wine, there's an executioner's block just a few steps away. So no, nobility isn't comfort. It's theater with higher stakes. War in the medieval world isn't about glory. It's about survival. When banners rise and horns sound, it isn't a call to adventure. It's a death sentence for hundreds, sometimes thousands, of souls who never had a choice. If you're a peasant, you don't volunteer. You're conscripted. You're handed a rusty spear, maybe a battered helmet, and you march behind your lord's banner with the same dread you'd feel walking to the gallows. You're not trained. You're not equipped. You're meat to be thrown into the grinder. If you're a knight, it's worse in some ways. You're expected to lead, to fight with skill, to live up to the romantic ideals sung by bards who've never seen a battlefield. You wear armor, yes, but it's heavy, suffocating, and brutally hot under the sun. A fall from your horse could break your ribs before a sword even touches you. Battles are chaos. Forget neat lines and orderly charges. Once the first clash happens, it becomes a swirling, screaming maelstrom. Shields shatter. Spears snap. Horses scream. Men trip over corpses and mud. Visibility vanishes in clouds of dust and blood. You don't see noble duels under banners. You see men stabbing wildly at each other, too terrified to think, too desperate to show mercy. And you hear it, the shrieks of the wounded, the gurgling of the dying, the barking of orders lost to the roar of battle. Wounds aren't clean. A sword might cleave through an arm. An arrow might pierce a gut and leave you to die slowly over days. Infection follows every scratch. Blood loss isn't immediate. It's slow, chilling, a creeping death that leaves you cold long before you lose consciousness. There's no medics. No clean bandages. If you're lucky, a comrade drags you off the field. If you're unlucky, you're left to the crows. And if you're captured, that's another nightmare. If you're rich, you might be ransomed. If you're poor, you might be enslaved, or tortured, or simply executed to save trouble. Villages in the path of armies fare no better. Soldiers need food, shelter, entertainment. They take what they want. A peaceful town can be emptied in hours, its barns looted, its homes burned, its people butchered or carried off. Women and girls suffer most, victims of spoils no one speaks of but everyone expects. War doesn't just kill bodies. It starves land. It poisons rivers. It sows famine that lasts for generations. And the men who survive, they don't come home heroes. They come home broken. The scars of war aren't just on the flesh, they run deep into the soul. Men return from battle with hollow eyes and trembling hands. Some can't sleep, haunted by the faces of those they killed or failed to save. Others become quick to anger, fists and words striking before reason can catch up. There's no understanding of trauma or healing. There's just a man changed and a village unsure what to do with him. And the land itself. It wears the wounds, too. Fields are abandoned, the soil choked with ashes. Wells are fouled by corpses. Roads once bustling with carts and travelers fall silent. Forests creep closer, reclaiming what was lost. Entire villages disappear, remembered only by ruined stones and whispered warnings. Famine often follows war like a second army. Crops trampled under boots. Granaries burned. Livestock slaughtered for passing soldiers. The survivors of battle often face a slower death at home, starvation stalking the young and the old first, then reaching for everyone else. Taxes don't stop because your fields are empty. Lords demand their dues, whether the harvest was rich or ruined. Those who cannot pay face imprisonment, the loss of their land, or forced labor to repay their debts. War breaks more than bodies. It breaks economies. It breaks families. It breaks hope. And then there's plague. Armies on the move carry more than swords. They carry disease. Dysentery sweeps through camps. Fevers rise. Wounds fester. And when the soldiers limp home, they bring the sickness with them. Villages that survive the sword may fall to invisible enemies carried in the breath of returning sons. Noble families are not immune to the ravages of war. A defeated lord might lose his lands, his titles, his head. Alliances shift. Promises are broken. A castle once thought impregnable is besieged, sacked, and left the shell of its former glory. A lady who once presided over grand feasts may find herself begging in a convent, a casualty of her husband's ambition. Even those who win in war often find the spoils meager. Land gained at the cost of generations of bloodshed. Fortunes built on the broken backs of survivors who will never trust again. And the cycle doesn't end. The next war brews before the last bodies are buried. Grudges fester. Borders blur. A new king rises with old enemies. Sons raised on stories of vengeance grow into men eager for their own glories and blind to the price. Because in the medieval world, war isn't an interruption of peace. It's the background noise of existence. The battlefield is not the end. After the fighting stops, the true consequences begin. Villages along the path of armies are gutted, homes reduced to scorched frames, fields salted or abandoned, wells poisoned either by malice or neglect. Survivors pick through ruins, searching for anything salvageable, a pot unbroken, a cloak unstolen, a memory unburned. Widows and orphans flood the landscape. Women once promised security find themselves landless and penniless. Some turn to begging, others to more desperate measures. Children are left to fend for themselves in a world that offers them no mercy. Feral bands of lost boys and girls drift from village to village, living on scraps, feared almost as much as pitied. And yet, society demands resilience. Life must continue. Crops must be replanted. Roofs must be patched. Livestock must be replaced. The fields, no matter how blood-soaked, must be coaxed back into fertility. The rhythm of survival cannot be broken, even when hearts are. Religion plays a complex role in the aftermath. Priests preach that war is God's will, that suffering purifies the soul. Victors thank heaven for their triumphs, the defeated beg forgiveness for their sins. Mass graves are blessed hurriedly. Churches fill with prayers for the dead and the desperate, as if words could stitch the broken world back together. And always, war leaves echoes. Songs are written, tragic ballads of fallen heroes, lamentations of ruined villages, cautionary tales sung by bards who never held the sword. Walls are built higher, and towns erect new defenses, but fear seeps deeper than any moat or parapet can protect. Knighthood, that supposed noble calling, grows bloodier, more cynical. Tales of valor fade, replaced by memories of betrayal, cowardice, and cruelty. Veterans return home to find no glory, only suspicion in the cold indifference of those untouched by battle. Even the lucky are not untouched. A farmer who survives the war may find his taxes double to pay for it. A craftsman who profits from making weapons must live with the knowledge of what his work wrought. A lord who gains new lands knows he stands on the graves of countless peasants who had no say in their fate. Peace is never total. It is a breath between battles, a shallow pause filled with mourning, rebuilding, and whispered fears. Because everyone knows the truth. War is not an exception. It is the rule. It is the loom on which the medieval world weaves its brutal, beautiful, broken tapestry. Death walks beside you in the medieval world. It isn't a rare visitor, knocking once a lifetime. It's a constant companion, brushing your shoulder in the marketplace, breathing over your cradle, whispering through the fields. And when the plague comes, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door in. You hear the rumors first, a ship in the harbor where sailors die coughing black blood. A village inland where no one answers the church bells. Merchants bring stories with their goods, entire towns gone silent, fields choked with the dead. Then you see it. The sickness moves faster than armies. One day, a neighbor complains of a headache. The next, he's covered in dark swellings, buboes, painful knots in his groin, under his arms, along his neck. He shivers and sweats. His eyes glaze. His body reeks before it even stops breathing. Panic spreads quicker than the disease. Some villages nail themselves shut. Some flee, though there's nowhere safe. Others turn to prayer, whipping themselves bloody in public squares, begging God's mercy. Some blame foreigners. Some blame witches. Some blame sinners. All you know is that bodies pile up faster than they can be buried. Graveyards overflow. New pits are dug hastily. Sometimes there's no time for prayers. Corpses are tossed into mass graves, quicklime thrown over them in a desperate attempt to hold back the stink and the flies. The priests, those who stay, wear masks stuffed with herbs, hoping to filter out the poisoned air. Doctors, if they come at all, offer useless advice, bloodletting, burning aromatic woods, carrying posies. Nothing works. Entire families vanish within days. Children orphaned by morning are dead by nightfall. Villages are abandoned to the weeds. Cats and dogs roam empty streets. Bells toll until the ropes fray and snap. And yet, you keep living. You pick through the wreckage. You take what's left. A better cloak from a dead man's house. A goat wandering loose. You bury your dead with calloused hands, muttering half-remembered prayers. Because what else is there to do? The plague teaches you that death is not something to fear. It is something to expect. Something to endure. Something as ordinary as the sunrise. Even when the plague isn't sweeping through the land, death remains relentless. Everyday life is a gauntlet of mortal threats. Childbirth is one of the most dangerous gambles a woman can face. Mothers die in agony, bleeding out or succumbing to fever while priests mutter last rites over their beds. Infants slip away before they even open their eyes. Fathers watch, helpless, knowing prayers and herbal brews are often all they can offer. Injury is another silent killer. A broken leg from a fall can be a death sentence. An infected cut from a rusty sickle can lead to slow, blistering death. A misplaced horse's kick can crush a chest in an instant. There's no surgery as you understand it. Bones are set by luck and brute strength. Wounds are cauterized with fire. Pain is not managed, it is endured. Hunger, too, stalks the countryside. A single failed harvest brings famine. When crops wither, so do the people. Grain stores empty. Rats fatten. Bread is stretched thinner, made with bark or clay. Parents give their last scraps to their children, then lie down and do not rise. Some turn to theft. Others to darker choices whispered about but rarely spoken aloud. Diseases of all kinds lurk everywhere. Water is a gamble, full of invisible sickness. Milk can spoil into poison. Meat can carry death from the moment it leaves the animal. Fevers rage, and few recover. Pox leaves survivors scarred and blind. Leprosy turns bodies into pariahs, slowly exiling the sick to the edges of villages where death can take them unseen. Animals carry their own dangers. Cows gore. Horses trample. Dogs bite. Even a pig, cornered and desperate, can maul a child in seconds. Farming isn't just labor, it's combat with creatures as desperate to survive as you are. Winter sharpens the edge. The cold creeps into bones, settles in lungs, whispers pneumonia into every breath. Frostbite blackens fingers and toes. A simple slip on an icy path can shatter a hip, and with it, any chance of survival through the season. And accidents, absurd, brutal accidents, claim lives just as easily. A roof beam falls. A fire gets out of hand. A cart tips over. A candle ignites a home built of tinder and hope. One moment you are alive. The next, a name muttered over ashes. Death is not an event. It is a companion, familiar and grim, an old neighbor whose knock you hear every day, whether or not you open the door. Death doesn't discriminate. Rich, poor, young, old, it harvests everyone eventually. Even the lords in their castles, even the monks cloistered behind stone walls, even the children too small to speak a prayer. No amount of gold, no volume of scripture, no charm or talisman can shield you when it's your time. And so, medieval people live with death woven into their daily existence. Wills are made early, if you're lucky enough to own anything worth passing on. Burial plots are sometimes arranged before a person reaches 30. A good death, meaning a death with confession, last rites, and a body buried in consecrated ground, is the best you can hope for. Without it, you risk eternal wandering. The fear of dying unshriven, without absolution, haunts many. Ghosts are believed to roam the earth, spirits twisted by anger, sorrow, or unfinished business. You hear tales of spectral nights clanking down deserted roads, of pale children crying at crossroads, of old women seen at windows long after their hearts stopped beating. Death rituals become anchors. Candles lit around the bed. Prayers murmured by family and priest. Coins placed on eyes or in hands to pay passage into the next world. Meals given to the poor in the name of the dead, hoping their souls might be eased. And the churchyard is always busy. Fresh graves. Fresh mounds. Fresh weeping, bells tolling over and over until the living half believe they hear them even in their sleep. But amid all the fear, all the loss, life persists. Children are still born, couples still wed, fields are still plowed, songs are still sung. Death doesn't end life, it sharpens it. Every meal, every warm fire, every safe childbirth, every harvest pulled from the earth feels miraculous against the backdrop of how easily it could all be snuffed out. People live hard. They love fiercely. They work until their hands crack and their backs bend. Because they know something that modern people often forget. Life is a temporary gift. and every heartbeat is a small rebellion against the darkness. Night in the medieval world is not a gentle thing. It's a curtain drawn tight over everything you know. A blanket of blackness so thick it feels alive, pressing into your home, your chest, your thoughts. The sun's departure doesn't bring rest. It brings fear. Because night is when the world turns wild. There are no street lamps, no flashlights, no glow of distant cities painting the sky. Only the moon when it chooses to appear, and the flicker of a candle you must ration like gold. Fire is life, but fire is fleeting. Once the sun sets, your world shrinks. Doors are bolted. Windows are shuttered. Children are hushed. The village quiets not out of peace, but out of dread. For out there, just beyond the light, is everything you can't control. Wolves howl from the forest. Bandits move under cover of night. Spirits, it's said, walk among the living. The night is the domain of the unknown, the cursed, the outcast. Even the good folk, the fair folk, the ones whispered about, are said to stir after dark. If you leave out milk, they might pass you by. If you forget, they might take something in return. Superstition isn't silly here. It's survival. You don't whistle after dark. You don't speak names of the dead. You don't point at the moon. Every rule is born from something someone swears they saw, or someone who vanished after failing to heed a warning. The silence itself becomes a force. You hear every creak of wood. Every gust of wind becomes a footstep. Rats in the rafters become demons in the eaves. And when someone in the house coughs, everyone wakes, because sickness doesn't sleep either. Inside, you huddle near the fire. Maybe you tell stories, low and slow, not to entertain but to distract. Maybe you hum. Maybe you pray. Maybe you just stare into the embers and hope the darkness stays on the other side of the wall. Because once night falls, the rules change. And survival means waiting for morning. Sleep, if it comes, is light and easily broken. You lie on straw stuffed with hay or moss, the blanket thin and coarse, the fire burned low to conserve wood. You curl beside others, family, servants, even animals, huddled not out of affection, but for warmth. You listen, always, for footsteps, for howls, for a knock at the door that no one is expecting. In towns, watchmen patrol with lanterns and staffs, calling the hour aloud, not to reassure, but to warn, to let the shadows know someone is listening. In the countryside, there's no one, just fences, the dark, and whatever waits beyond it. Night is when thieves strike. Not the kind that sneak into castles, but the desperate. A neighbor who once helped you sow barley now slips through your door to steal bread. A hungry boy might gut a chicken and vanish before dawn. You don't call it betrayal. You call it night. If someone is dying, they often slip away after dark. The body quiets. The breathing slows. No one sees the soul leave, but everyone feels the moment it's gone. The fire pops. The air grows still. And something deep in your gut tells you they are no longer here. Sometimes the wind rises just after. You tell yourself it's nothing, just weather. But still, you light another candle. Because you never know what rides on the wind at night. Some don't wait for dawn. Some slip into the night. The desperate, the grieving, the lost, they walk into the blackness with nothing but a cloak and a prayer. Some seek loved ones. Some seek death. Some are never seen again. Night is when secrets happen. Illicit meetings in shadowed corners. Quiet births in candlelit rooms. Silent deaths, too, the kind that leave no scream, only silence and suspicion. A woman gone by morning. A man with blood on his boots. And everyone knowing but no one saying. Night is when things come undone. It's when dreams twist into visions, and visions into dread. When you wake soaked in sweat, unable to move, convinced something stood at your bedside and vanished the moment your eyes opened. You don't tell anyone. Or if you do, they nod, because they've seen it too. The dark brings madness in pieces. A baby cries and won't stop. An old man mutters at shadows. A wife swears her husband isn't her husband anymore. The dark listens. The dark watches. The dark collects these frayed edges and stitches them into the fabric of night. And yet, people endure. Not because the night grows softer, but because the soul grows tougher. You learn to read the stars. You learn to count your breaths. You learn the sound of real danger and the rhythm of your own heart. And when the sky begins to pale, when that first bird calls, unsure but brave, it feels like salvation. The light doesn't banish the dark. It just holds it back. For now, the medieval world was cruel, but it wasn't joyless. Even in a life filled with mud and hunger, war and fear, people found moments to smile. Not despite the hardship, but because of it. When you live on the edge of survival, every small good thing feels like a miracle. A warm loaf of bread pulled from the hearth. A jug of ale shared among friends. A patch of sunlight on a winter day. These are the things people lived for. Joy wasn't grand. It didn't arrive in parades or palaces. It crept in during the quiet moments. A song hummed while threshing wheat, a child's laughter echoing through a field, the sight of green shoots after a long frost, the smell of lavender in a clean tunic, a letter from a cousin who survived the sickness. Celebration, though rare, was treasured. A wedding meant food, dancing, and color. Ribbons tied to trees. Laughter around a fire. For one day, the burdens lifted. Even funerals could turn strangely sweet, not because death was good, but because a life had been witnessed, remembered. Children brought light, even when they cried. They were the future, fragile and uncertain, yes, but also hope wrapped in tiny fists and unsteady steps. Even work had joy in it. A harvest safely gathered, wool spun without knots, a fire that lit on the first strike, satisfaction in a straight fence line, pride in bread that rose just right. The joy of a task well done wasn't loud, but it lingered. Joy also lived in the sacred. A candle lit in prayer, a hymn sung with others. The feeling of being part of something older, larger, eternal. Religion wasn't just fear, it was also comfort, belonging, beauty. Cathedrals soared not just to impress God, but to lift people's eyes from the mud beneath their feet. Joy was found in the natural world, a world that, while unforgiving, offered its own quiet gifts. Birdsong at dawn. The way fog curled over a field. The smell of wet earth after rain. The thrill of wild strawberries, tart and sudden, discovered on the edge of a forest. Watching the stars while lying on a barn roof. These moments didn't need explanation. They simply were. Animals brought happiness too. A loyal dog, a gentle ox, a kitten born in the straw. Animals were not just tools or food, they were companions. A child laughing as a lamb stumbled across the yard. A pig that learned to follow its owner like a dog. The way horses nuzzled your hand when you returned from market. Community was another source of joy. In a world where isolation meant danger, togetherness meant life. Shared chores became social time. Spinning wool with others. Baking with neighbors. Singing while working. This shared rhythm of hands and voices binding people in ways deeper than blood. There was joy in stories, too. Evenings by the hearth, firelight flickering as elders recited tales of saints, monsters, and distant lands. Children wide-eyed, adults nodding at familiar turns. Stories passed through generations like heirlooms, and for many, they were the heirlooms. Laughter echoed through taverns and kitchens. It was loud and often vulgar, but it was real. Humor was earthy, jokes about bodily functions, priests, animals behaving badly. A moment of laughter could pierce a week's worth of worry. Even the passing seasons offered their own quiet happiness. Spring brought the color green and the sound of birds returning. Summer brought long days and sweet air. Autumn gave harvest and the satisfaction of hard work stored safely away. Winter gave rest, forced, cold, but shared, and the simple pleasure of fire, stew, and sleep. Love, though rarely romanticized, was still a source of joy. A glance across a market. A hand touched beneath the table. A whispered promise in a hayloft. Marriages often began as contracts but sometimes grew into deep partnerships. Love survived, quietly, beneath layers of duty. Joy wasn't perfect. It didn't erase suffering, but it stood beside it, shoulder to shoulder. In the quiet moments between the brutal ones, medieval life was filled with small anchors, things that tethered people to the world when everything else tried to pull them loose. The scent of herbs hung to dry in the rafters. A child's first steps across a dirt floor. A loaf of rye bread that rose just right in the oven. A melody hung from memory while fetching water. These weren't luxuries, they were lifelines. People carved joy from stone. A carved token worn around the neck. A pressed flower tucked inside a prayer book. A secret spot in the woods where someone first kissed you or where you went to cry. These moments were small, but in a life so fleeting, they were mighty. The joy of rest was different. Earned, necessary. Falling asleep knowing the animals were fed, the roof hadn't leaked, the child hadn't coughed. A still body on a straw bed, wrapped in wool, listening to the wind and knowing, for tonight, you were safe. There was joy in making, in weaving a basket tight and strong, in shaping clay into something that might last a season, in carving a spoon that fits just right in the hand. These things said, I was here. I shaped this world, however briefly. Even age, for those rare enough to reach it, carried its own sweetness. A grandmother teaching her grandchild to thread a needle. An old man chuckling at a joke he'd heard 100 times. Wrinkles earned from sun, wind, and laughter alike. And though life was short, joy stretched it. Joy made hours feel like days, and memories feel like treasures. It was stitched into every shared meal, every whispered prayer, every dance stomped out on muddy ground. In a world that took so much, people still found ways to give, not gold, not power, but joy. To share laughter, to mend clothes, to leave flowers at a grave, to sing when it was easier to stay silent. Joy was not just survival, it was defiance. And in the end, it was enough. You've journeyed through the dust and darkness, through the hunger and hope of a world long vanished, but never really forgotten. In the hard soil and the battered walls, in the whispered prayers and the wild laughter, medieval life endures. It reminds us that even in the harshest times, humanity clings fiercely to beauty, to joy, to meaning. Thank you for traveling back in time with Lore FM tonight. If you enjoyed this journey, there are many more waiting, across ancient ruins, forgotten kingdoms, and the secret corners of history. Until next time, sleep well, dream deep, and remember, even the smallest light can hold back the dark.